I hereby call the workshop to order. Can I have roll call, please?
Commissioner Drosky,
Here.
Commissioner Hudak,
Here.
Commissioner Preston. He's on mute. Commissioner Preston, I need you to unmute.
Here.
Vice
Can you
Mayor
hear me?
Parnas,
Here.
Mayor Gantz. Okay,
If you will all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May the meeting begin.
Thank you, Vice Mayor, City Commissioners. I know we are getting started a little bit late. I do have a few things to go over with you before we get into the very first presentation.
Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Before we get started, if it's all right with you and the rest of the commission, we lost a firefighter today. If we could give a moment of silence to him. I worked with him at the city of Deerfield Beach. Excuse me? And so if we could give him a moment of silence, I would greatly appreciate it, sir.
Absolutely. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you. I know that we are getting started a few minutes late this evening. I do have a few things that I want to go over before we get into the very first presentation from Environmental Services. First off, just to follow up on a question from yesterday in relation to some of the enterprise funds. I was asked to provide a little bit of information on the financials into those enterprise funds, so that I can answer that. The utility fund budget for this current year is approximately $29.4 million. The overall net position of the water and sewer fund is approximately $76,600,000 and has an unrestricted balance of $26.1 million. In the solid waste fund budget was $18,300,000. It has a total net position of negative $7.4 million and an unrestricted balance of negative $11.5 million. The stormwater utility fund had a budget of $2.1 million approximately, and has a total net position of $886,000 and an unrestricted balance of $314,000. Of course, the stormwater utility fund is in its infancy, so has not had a lot of time to accumulate any net position at this point. But that question was asked yesterday, so wanted to make sure that it was provided to all of the commissioners. Additionally, I just want to further clarify what the contingency slide is that you are looking at. Okay, so with a budget of over $100 million in the general fund, the contingency slides would represent approximately 10% of that 100 million, or over $10 million. As I mentioned yesterday, we have, currently, as we continue to refine the budget, and we're at this point scraping away, bone and coming to some decisions that will have some greater impacts than what we have been able to do so far. Again, those contingency items are things that we are looking to have. I am looking to have conversations with the commission on, in terms of what their appetite might be for some of these items, and it's none, then what are some of the suggestions that you may have? But that said, the gap we're trying to continue to get to is a general fund budget at present day of about 102.8 million. So there's about a $5 million gap that we still have to bridge. And as I mentioned yesterday, we'll scrape that away. We can get there. I'm fully confident that that will occur. It's just how we get there, and with your input and your guidance, based on the some of the items that we're presenting to you and each department is presenting to you. But if you do the math, you'll recognize that not everything that's being presented to you in the contingency needs to occur or should occur. And so it's meant to overcompensate, and it's done purposely so that there is opportunity and options for you. And so I just want to make that very clear. Then I have some very good news to share, and it's very timely. We just learned about this today, and it's because I have this platform, if you will. I thought it would be appropriate to share it. I want to congratulate our utilities department and our water plant specifically, Mr. Tom Good and Alan Fathy, all of their team that they have over there. They have been awarded by the Florida section of the American Water Works Association as the most improved water treatment Class A plant for the year 2019. So that just is hot off the press today. I want to congratulate the entire staff, all the workers over there at the water plant for this tremendous achievement. Additionally, just about 10 minutes ago, we got word that the Government Finance Officers Association has awarded the city of Deerfield Beach the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for our 2019-20 year budget. So that just came in today as well. So sharing that good news, and without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Environmental Services, Alan Fathy, Priscilla Segal, and the rest of their team for their presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, and residents. My name is Priscilla Segal. I am the Assistant Director for Engineering and Operations with the Environmental Services Department. First slide, please. Tonight, I will be taking you through our fiscal year 21 budget for road and bridge, stormwater, construction and facilities, and highlight our achievements for this past year, as well as go into our goals for next year and the projected budget for that year. I start off with this first slide showing one of our achievements for this year. This was awarded the South Florida APWA Stormwater Project of the Year. It's a water quality structure that was installed on Southeast 9th Avenue, adjacent to the Kingfisher Canal. Next slide. In addition to this achievement, we've completed drainage improvement on Southeast 8th and 9th Terrace. We are also currently resurfacing numerous streets within the city. We completed neighborhoods such as Carver Heights and Coral Manor this past year, in addition to a number of arterial corridors such as Southeast 10th Street, Southeast 12th Avenue, Fairway Drive, and Newport Center Drive. We performed maintenance to 5 critical city bridges, and these include 2 bridges in Deer Creek, Little Harbor, Southeast 12th Avenue, and Southwest 28th Avenue. In addition to that, we received grant funding through the HUD program. We were able to install sidewalk in Carver Heights, and with an FDOT LAP contract, funded a sidewalk on Military Trail between Goolsby and Hillsborough. Additionally, we are closing in on the FEC corridor fence project. We're very close to nearing completion on that project. Next slide. So for fiscal year 21, our goals predominantly are completion of the Stormwater Master Plan. This plan is critical to the identification of our priority infrastructure needs in the city. We're also going to be designing and constructing improvements to the surface streets for drainage in front of City Hall. And this too was funded through a grant. This was through FEMA, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. More good news on the grants front. We received funding through the surtax, and this funded pedestrian lighting, construction of pedestrian lighting citywide, and the design for FAU Research Park Boulevard, Southeast 2nd Avenue and Pioneer Grove, and rehabilitates the Southeast 13th and 15th Avenue bridges in the Cove. We are going to be performing condition assessments of our streets and our sidewalks, and the criticality for this is to capitalize on future available surtax funds in order to avail of ourselves of those funds in this next round. Next slide, please. So looking at our operating budget, you will see we are holding the line on our personal services. We have shown a slight increase in operating expenditures, and that is to address those needs that we have for condition assessment of pavement and sidewalk. So we have been able to balance that with reducing other line items, but at the end of the day, we still have a slight increase in operations. Our capital outlay, we reduced significantly, and that's because this year we're doing so much capital with grant funding. You'll see we're receiving over $3 million from the Broward County surtax. Next slide, please. So looking at our Stormwater Fund, again, holding the line on our personal services. Our operating expenditures show a slight increase. This is for inspection and condition assessment of our pipes. Our capital outlay is largely unchanged. We do have an underground storage tank closure and a vehicle replacement this year, but we're funding the same amount as in prior years, approximately $400,000, $375 this year in annual stormwater improvements. And again, we're receiving these grant funds for the construction of the City Hall drainage improvements. Next slide. So future considerations beyond this fiscal cycle, understanding that with road reconstruction, we really want to be looking at holistically fixing the road and everything under the road. But those costs for the underground utilities, those are a local cost that are not borne by the surtax or reimbursable through the state. So we do need to anticipate this in our budgets and budget accordingly for road reconstruction, such as FAU Research Park Boulevard and Southeast 2nd Avenue. Additionally, if overhead lines are desired to be underground, that too would come at a local cost, as those are not reimbursable charges. Streetscape elements, these are a very critical element to a project to create a sense of place. We did a wonderful job on Hillsborough Boulevard with our decorative lighting and the thermoplastic crosswalks that really create a destination, make the city of Deerfield Beach feel special. But these again come at a cost, and they're locally borne and not reimbursable through state and county initiatives. And while our city bridges are being maintained currently, and we are going through a rehabilitation project here shortly on the 13th and 15th Avenue bridges, we do need to have consideration for their future replacement. We are extending their life, but we'll add a few years, but in the future, we do need to have funding in place to replace them. And lastly, on this slide, the flood-prone areas, when we prioritize these based on public need, we do need to understand that this is going to be a significant investment, and it currently exceeds our funding allocations. Next slide. So thinking towards, how we address the contingency, how do we look towards cutting down to the bone, those things that can potentially be deferred. Professional services is one item we're looking at for road and bridge. However, as I indicated, if we reduce these professional services, we won't be able to avail ourselves potentially of the surtax funding in this next fiscal cycle. We do need a condition assessment in order to qualify for those funds. We also can defer vehicles. Deferring vehicles is easy. However, it comes at a cost with increased maintenance, downtime on vehicles, and reduction in productivity. Our stormwater utility expenditure, similarly, we looked at reducing our professional services. This comes at the cost of projects that could be grant eligible should they be shovel ready. Typically, we like to have a couple of projects already designed to be able to go after grants for construction. Other contractual services, such as the lining services we were discussing for condition assessment of pipes, should we defer that, that means that, you know, we're just prolonging the inevitable and needing the replacement of a pipe. And again, deferring a vehicle for stormwater utility, again, increasing our maintenance costs for vehicles in use. Next slide. So going into our construction and facilities management, our West Community Center Phase 2 and lifeguard towers are designed. That means they're shovel ready. Frankly, these are just pending funds. So, you know, once we are in a situation or potentially have some grant eligibility for these kinds of projects, we will be shovel ready and gearing to go. Next slide. We have completed this year our main beach restroom renovation. This largely included redoing the floors, the ceiling tiles, vanities, and mirrors, and partitions. Next slide. Additionally, this year, we completed the RFQ process for the Johnny Tigner Center and City Hall. We are currently in the RFP rebid for the Center for Active Aging, and that will close in July. Our facilities group provided quite a bit of support to our Siemens project team. We really want to get educated on these systems that are going into our buildings so we can best maintain them in the future. We additionally addressed fire station exhaust systems in numerous fire stations citywide and building envelope concerns. Lastly, and probably most importantly right now, is we are working to respond to COVID-19. Our folks diligently provide PPE and supplies to all of our personnel and the critical cleanings, deep cleanings to each of our buildings to ensure the safety of the public and our employees. Next slide. Fiscal year 21, we will be designing and completing the Pioneer Park dock repair. This will be done in phases. We're going to design and permit the entire replacement of the dock, but only build the critical component at this time. But that will achieve having the permits in place so that we can do subsequent repairs to the other piers at the dock. Additionally, we will be opening our Arboretum Phase 2. We will be awarding the design build contracts for the Center for Active Aging, the Johnny Tigner Center and City Hall, and constructing improvements to the pool as well as to the building at the pool with roofing improvements. Lastly, we are implementing some strategies for preventative maintenance to really try to extend the life of our buildings. This includes a roofing assessment that we're going to be conducting in order to best prioritize and earmark where the funds should be allocated. Next slide. So looking at our operating budget for construction and facilities, again, no change in personnel services. Our operating expenditures do show a slight increase. This is associated with Fire Station 111. It's the trailer, if you're familiar with it, on Goolsby. And this trailer is in need of replacement. We're going to be doing a rental to try to keep our costs down. And as we conduct that master plan to best assess our fire station needs. In our capital outlay, we have a few items that we see as critical: the Pier Cafe air fresh system, Aquatic Center roof replacement, Fire Station 66 life safety improvements, and the Pioneer Park dock replacement. Next slide. The future considerations beyond FY21. Again, we really need to be thinking master plan wise about our public safety buildings and city facilities to program these improvements. We really want to situate these facilities in their best location and address the greatest need first, and phase improvements to replace our Pioneer Park dock system. Again, this is to try to extend the replacement of this dock system as funds become available. Additionally, we need to be mindful that our beach bollard lighting, we can no longer maintain the system that is out there, and it will require a wholesale replacement. We're going to be piloting a new bollard at the Kirk Cottrell Pavilion, and that will be the prototype for the beach moving forward. Future projects really should address our climate action policies and initiatives currently underway in the city. We really want to continue that effort initiated by our sustainability management group and our Siemens contract. Thank you so much. Next slide. Contingency here, speaking to capital, our capital deferrals. We could defer the aquatic center roof. However, we need to know that maintenance costs may be throwing good money after bad at this point. So this is out there for consideration. The Pier Cafe air fresh system, we could defer those improvements. Air circulation is kind of critical at this moment, especially in the COVID era that we're in, as far as hygiene and sanitation and keeping proper air circulation. Custodial services, we proposed a reduction to levels of services, but as you all are aware, this is probably one of the areas where our level of service is most needed, especially right now with responding to COVID-19. We did take a 10% reduction across all of our services. These include services for plumbing and pest control, AC maintenance, painting and pier maintenance. This 10% reduction again could decrease our level of service to our constituency. We also looked at reducing our materials in stock. This may delay our time in repairs. Next slide. And with that, I turn it over to Alan Fati.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure why my video is not starting.
Yeah, you are.
All right, here we are. Good evening, Alan Fati, Assistant Director for Utilities. I'm going to present the achievement, goals, and budget recommendation for utilities. As for achievement, we've completed the accelerator project at the water treatment plant, which was recognized as South Florida Water Project of the Year by APWA. The plant is back to normal operation at full capacity. Next slide, please. We finished the first phase of demolition work at East Water Treatment Plant. The project is done, and the only thing that remains is closing out the project, and that should happen next couple of weeks. Next, please. All rehab work for the 1 million gallon water tower is completed, and except for some minor cleanup work, the project is done. That should be done in the next couple of weeks, and the tower should be back in service. Next, please. In addition, we finished the intercoastal water main project and replaced water main that has been out of service for 15 years. We also completed the second phase of water distribution leak detection study west of I-95. The first phase of the project was in 2019 for east of I-95. As for master plan, the project is pretty much, we have received the draft report and expect to finalize it in July. We plan to request a workshop with the commission to present the findings. Please, next. As for the goals for FY21, we plan to replace lift station 25, which is one of the oldest lift stations in the city. Well 19 rehab work is under construction, and we expect to be completed before the end of the year. We also plan to rehab 6 raw water wells to restore the water production capacity. As for advanced metering project, we are in process of negotiating with vendors and expect to have an agreement for commission review by September. And if approved, start the implementation in fall. We have finished the second phase. We are working to finish the second phase of demo work for East Water Treatment Plant, and we are working on the plans as we speak. We hope to have that in purchasing in next month and have it under construction or by fall. We also plan to finish the chlorine gas conversion project, which replaces the existing gas system to liquid. The project is currently under design, and the construction is scheduled for next year. Next, please. This table kind of summarizes all the utility accounts, which includes engineering and administration, water plant, utility maintenance, county wastewater, and water and wastewater renewal replacement. We are recommending a budget that is about $1.4 million less than that last year. Next, please. For engineering, the total budget request is about 16% less than last year. The personnel budget is reduced by 11% due to the reduction in insurance costs. We are holding the line on operating expenditure and reduced all discretionary expenses such as travel and training. We are also holding the line on capital outlay and plan to only replace one printer and a scanner in 2021. Next, please. Next slide, please. No, go back, I'm sorry. For water plant, the budget request is reduced by 4.5%. The personnel budget is reduced by 8.2% due to the reduction in insurance costs and some organization changes that Mr. Good will discuss next. Next slide, please. Tom?
Am I heard?
Yes, Tom.
Great. Good evening, Vice Mayor and Commissioners. Tom Good, Assistant City Manager. I just want to explain a little bit about how we get to this position of deleting a senior staff position. I just want to remind everybody in fiscal year 20 this year, Environmental Services absorbed the Capital Construction and Facilities Maintenance Division. That was done to better align work functions. And to better align those work functions, we had facilities maintenance activities, and it was merged with utilities maintenance activities. And the capital construction projects have been merged with the engineering projects. These changes have allowed for consolidation of management oversight and subsequently a reduction in management costs. So let me explain the changes that make possible the consolidation and the eventual deletion of a senior management position. So what you see here is our boxes with a title, and in parentheses is essentially the funding source for that titled position. So what has occurred is that I was at the Director of Environmental Services. I was funded out of the Environmental Services Administration. I have been since reassigned to Assistant City Manager, and I am currently being funded out of the City Manager's office account, as well as several of the enterprise funds. So now that the Director of Environmental Services position is vacant, we are going to reassign Assistant Director of Utilities, Alan Fati, who is currently being funded out of the water plant, and assign him to Environmental Services Director. So now he will be funded out of Environmental Services Administration. The Assistant Director of Engineering and Operations is currently funded out of Administration, and that's Priscilla, and she's going to be reassigned as the City Engineer. And I just want to make it clear, as a City Engineer, she now manages engineering, streets, stormwater. She now has the added duty of the capital projects, and that includes the bond projects. This title change, as well as the reassignment to this position, it allows for a better alignment of her and her title to the many references that are in our current code of ordinances. Many times it references the city engineer. We now have a city engineer. The facility operations administrator is currently funded out of the water plant and utility, is going to be reassigned to be the assistant environmental services director. currently and keeping that same funding out of the water plant and utilities maintenance. So this leaves the facility operations administrator position vacant. And because now all these functions have a proper management oversight, we no longer need the facility operations administrator. So we are going to delete that position and return about a $90,000 charge back to the fund. I just want to say too that all these staff positions are uniquely qualified for the roles they are assuming. So that explains the deletion of the senior staff position. So I'd like to turn it back to Alan to complete his presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Next slide, please. Back to the water plant. We are holding the line on operational expenses. In general, we have reduced all discretionary expenses, but operational expenses include some non-discretionary expenses such as chemicals, electricity, raw water cost, and limestone disposal, which is majority of that budget that you see there. The budget also includes such items as arc flash study, plant exterior painting, replacement of number of valves that we have problems with, and rehab of the front end loader that we use for sludge process. The capital outlay, we plan to replace an 1-hour-old system pump, a compressor, purchase lab and maintenance equipment, and pay for our share of underground storage tank closure at Goolsby facilities. Next, please. For utility maintenance, our budget request is about 9% less than last year. The operating budget is reduced by about 13%. All discretionary items have been reduced, but operating expenses include some non-discretionary items such as electricity, parts to maintain water system, and parts to maintain wastewater system. We also include an assessment of condition assessment of some of our piping system under that operational expenditure. For capital outlay, we are requesting budget to rehab manholes, replace a dump truck, replace a utility truck, and instead of replacing another truck we use for fire hydrant work, we plan to purchase a trailer to reduce the cost. Next, please. The cost for Broward County wastewater services has increased by 4.2%, and the county reports that they have another increase for 2021, but we still don't know what that amount is. Next, please. The budget recommendation for water and sewer renewal and replacement fund is reduced by about 13%, and major projects for FY21 include advanced metering project, the treatment plant chlorine gas conversion project. Other improvements include in the budget are plant security upgrade, gravity sewer lining, and replacement of plant operation center hurricane shutters. Next, please. As for future consideration, we need to develop a funding strategy to address master plan's recommendations. For water treatment plan, the recommendation includes replacement of lime treatment with an ion exchange system to reduce cost and increase reliability. For water distribution system, the recommendation includes replacement of a number of water mains to improve hydraulics and system pressure. For wastewater system, the recommendation includes improvement to pumping system for some of the lift stations to meet the future demand. We are also going to focus on developing asset management condition assessment program. Would you go back, please? Thank you. Although we have a lot of information regarding our water and wastewater system in GIS, their condition is not documented. In order to develop rehab and replacement priorities, we are planning to evaluate the condition of the asset. For the assets that can be evaluated by our staff, we are working with the IT to develop a tool to allow our staff to document the asset condition while they're in the field. We are also planning to establish a water main and force main replacement program to address aging piping system. We plan to start the program to physically inspect some of our critical piping network. For example, for FY21, we are planning to inspect fourth section of our force main by digging and cutting a section of the pipe to physically inspect it to make and develop a rehab method for it. Also, climate change has an impact on our water and wastewater system. Existing wastewater assets will be impacted by sea level rise that will increase inflow and infiltration into the sewer system. Some of our wastewater assets, such as manholes and lift stations, are placed in a low-lying area that will be impacted by larger storm events. Some of our raw water wells will be impacted by saltwater intrusion. Therefore, we are working to develop a long-term plan to harden our asset and minimize the impacts. Next, please. We have identified four contingency budget items as requested by the city manager. One is advanced metering project, which will replace about 82% of all the city and allow remote reading of the meters. The project is expected to reduce labor for water meter reading and increase revenue from more accurate water meters. Obviously, deferring this project will reduce the labor cost and will not increase the revenue expected from new meters. The new meters are expected to improve accuracy by more than 2.5%. The main reason for gas conversion project is to improve safety and reduce upkeep cost of the existing system. Deferring it will postpone cost savings and defers the safety improvement. We also identify services as contingency line item as an option for the commission to consider. They include consulting services and arc flash study. Deferring this project will delay required improvements and defers maintenance cost savings. And lastly, the commission might consider increasing wastewater rate to recover 2020 cost increase from the county. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions you have.
Are there any questions from the commission?
I'm good.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
I think Commissioner Drosky has a question, Vice Mayor.
Well, okay, Commissioner Drotsky.
Should I just wave tonight as opposed to raising the hand virtually? Is that better for this evening?
I really,
Vice Mayor?
well, I see you now, so you're on.
Okay, I just want to understand the protocol going forward, but thank you. I don't know if it's for Mr. Fadi or for Mr. Good, but the question with respect to the Stormwater Fund, now that we're a year or two into it, are you able to comment onto what kind of pressures that has taken off of your budget? And you know, I know I'm putting you on the spot, so any specifics that you can give would be great, or if you need time to circle back and get with me. I'm just trying to understand how, you know, the Stormwater Fund has decreased, you know, the pressures on your budget.
So Commissioner Drosky, I can say that from Ms. Lajenik's presentation, she's indicating that a lot of capital projects are now becoming identified, and it is going to put more of a need for, in order to be able to get these projects accomplished, in order to mitigate the flood that occurs in areas that are being officially documented.
Okay. And I have a second follow-up question. It's going to seem very minor, but it's not minor to my residents. So I'll ask you, because I see you on the screen, Mr. Good. I don't see Priscilla or Alan anymore. But as part of the traffic mitigation, and in particular the speed humps that are installed, I don't know which line item that falls into your budget. But I would please, you know, like to see that not decreased or eliminated. As you know, we have a speeding problem in our city, not just my district, but all of the districts, and the residents greatly appreciate these traffic calming devices that are being installed. And so I would prefer to see that item, not decreased going forward, because there's a lot of demand for it. And I know the wish list going forward is still quite, lengthy. So I would not want to take away from that going forward.
Priscilla,
But
did you
that
want
is
to speak to that?
that is funded under Road and Bridge, and it's funded as a traffic calming item. We have not reduced it.
Okay, that's all I have, Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes.
Then go ahead. Commissioner Preston?
Priscilla, how many people work under you?
Forgive me, I'm working with the muting button. I have 10 folks in streets. I have 3 folks in stormwater. In capital projects, 3.
So that's a total of how many?
17 approximately.
17. And their salary, including your own, would be represented in personnel services. Is that correct?
I believe my salary comes out of utilities under administration.
Okay. So the 890,000 would represent the other people that are under you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
10
So-
folks under my streets department.
Excuse me?
10 folks in my streets department.
Okay. Okay. So we're basically looking at 900,000 in salaries alone, correct?
Correct. And that is with, FICA and insurance and pension, as well as other, items that get lumped into personal services.
Okay.
Excuse me, Commissioner Preston, if I may also just add for a moment. There are some engineering folks that are also, I believe, in the admin, which are the project engineers, and reviewer, engineering techs. So those salaries are captured there as well.
Okay. 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 That's okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move on? Hearing none, David, if you will move the meeting, please.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The next budget presentation will be from Planning and Development Services to include the Planning Division, Building Inspection Service, as well as code compliance. And with that, Mr. Powers.
Good evening, Eric Power, Director of Planning Development Services for the City of Deerfield Beach. Here to talk tonight about our department. You can go to the next slide. So just a little bit about the department as a whole. Planning Development Services is an essential services department. We did not close for one day due to COVID-19. Plans were reviewed, inspections were performed, streets were monitored by code compliance. On top of not rescinding at all of our regular daily services, I'm happy to tell you that really we're busier than ever. And I'll discuss this point a little bit later on with our slides. As far as the accomplishments for the FY20 year, implementing the plastic straw ban, creating the post-disaster redevelopment plan, historic preservation ordinance, we secured traffic review and services for outside traffic studies, which is a major improvement for our development process because we're able to have an independent plan reviewer for traffic improvements for projects that might require additional offsite improvements. As you recall, last year, we were able to hire an extra person for code compliance, and we were able to do that. And we've moved around some of the situation for code compliance to allow for a greater customer service opportunity. We did complete department-wide customer service training, and we do offer now virtual inspections for residential properties due to COVID-19. Interior inspections throughout the county, even the state, came to a halt. And we were able to use video conferencing software like FaceTime, Skype, things like that, in order for inspectors to honestly be at their desk in the building and be able to look at inspections for interior residential properties. So we were able to keep that service moving. the entire time. Even though we had a lot of successes this year, I got to point out that staff had to put on hold some of our other FY20 goals due to COVID-19. Those were the county city zoning amendments and the creation of the new business medical district for the hospital and the surrounding areas. These items would require a significant amount of resident and business owner involvement in the form of public meetings. And of course, we can't do that right now. We have every intention to be able to do that as soon as we're able to and move forward with those programs. You can move to the next slide. So as far as our upcoming goals for FY21, the first one is the evaluation and appraisal report, or the EAR. This is a mandatory comprehensive planning exercise the state requires that each city in the state go through every 7 years. So our time is up. It requires that cities incorporate any changes made by the state in those years related to the various items, water capacity, sustainability, coastal management, traffic improvements, housing, all sorts of things that occur in our comprehensive plan. And because of the extent of these changes, the impact it would take on staff to complete our own, we've already begun the RFP process for a consultant. GovEasy is almost finally here. Happy to report that we are at the final stage of that program and we're on track to begin October 1st. As you know, GovEasy is an online permitting software that we need to bring the building department forward. Applicants will be able to upload plans and pay fees online, and all important necessary functions are needed in the time of COVID-19. It's very important. I'm being told that my background is backwards. It's not for me, so I apologize. This is an item being brought forward for the Neighborhood Improvement Program. It's an item that's being brought forward that we need to discuss. Many commissioners have brought this up and brought this to our attention, that we would like to improve the program for code compliance and code services. So what we're asking to do is to create the Shady Tree Program, to expand the Shady Tree Program actually, and to create the Neighborhood Improvement Program. Essentially what that's going to be is a low cost function for the residents who maybe can't afford, to improve things like their lawn, the landscaping, paint, things like that. Instead of us citing them and then running through a problem where they can't afford to make the changes, we can go through a program where our abatement dollars might be able to help them make those changes, and it offsets the ability or the need for a code compliance case. So this is a project that I'm hoping it will begin October 1, and you will see those code changes coming for you for recommendation for approval before the end of this fiscal year. And budgets, of course, have been reduced and offset, and the revenue costs for COVID-19 and next year's budgets will be impacted as well. This isn't going to stop us from still trying to make the improvements to the city we are hoping for. It's just going to change how we go about doing it. It's our hope that we'll be able to apply for and be awarded grant opportunities that will allow us to continue our planning efforts. In addition, we're currently working with FAU to bring one of their master programs projects to Deerfield Beach. Currently, we're discussing the benefits that could bring to the city regarding Dixie Highway. And when we know more about this, we will bring it to your attention. You can go to the next slide. So I don't want to dwell too much on this slide, as the next few will break every division down into more detail, but to note, the overall percentage change to planning development services is shown here in this slide is a bit misleading, as building services budget line is really a constant moving target. And I'll elaborate more on that in just a moment. You can move on to the next slide. So overall expenditures have been reduced by about 8% for the next year. This is partly due to a frozen vacant position for a planner that we have. The planning division is very, very busy. We really do need this position. I am asking that it remain vacant, not eliminated, with the possibility of us being able to fill it in the future. Another change we're proposing is to swap a couple of our administrative positions. We're eliminating the planning technician title and we're creating the assistant planner title. Over the past year, due to our busy workload, our planning assistant has acted more in the capacity of an actual planner, constantly helping residents with basic zoning tasks and dealing with customers than her actual administrative capacity. So we would like to formally amend this and position that person to the planning section. Our current permit technician would then assume the role of the planning assistant. No one is being lost in the position shuffle. We are simply creating the new title and eliminating an old one. So the pay increase is only one step above the current position and only impacts personal services marginally. Regarding operating expenditures, we're obviously cutting back as much as we can while still trying to maintain our current level of service. The removal of the contractual service dollars does take away our ability to utilize CCNA services, help us prepare for surtax funding and complete street improvements. It also puts a pause on possible changes to the RSO and DBR districts, which staff identified as needing to be updated. This is where we're hoping to apply for those grants I was just talking about in order to keep these projects moving forward. You can move to the next slide, please. So I don't really need to tell anyone here that development and redevelopment of the city is currently in full force. You see it every day. I do want to elaborate on the subject a little bit at the end of the presentation, but what's important is that these are banner years brought on by a solid economy and changes that were made to make the city of Deerfield Beach more developer friendly. I'd love to tell you this is going to remain constant, but long-term impacts of COVID-19 for development are unclear right now. What I can say is that building services is the tail end of the dog, so to speak. Building revenues are the last to be impacted by a recession, and they're the last to see improvements when the economy gears back up. I do believe in conversations that I've had with current development, potential future developers that want to be in the city. The next 2 to 3 years, we will continue to see development in the city, even if the COVID-19 recession becomes long-term. We may not have the same numbers that we saw in 2018, 19, and 20, but I do expect to see 2021 to be above expectation. And it's important to note also that if you took the average of every year of building revenue from 2006 to 2019, and even if you remove the best and worst years, the average building revenue is only about $2.8 million. Being above $4 million in permanent revenue for any year should really be considered a successful year for development in Deerfield Beach. The last couple years really are an asterisk to what we've been looking at and what I think we'll be looking at in the future. Move to the next slide. So code compliance services aren't really going to change next year, as the contract is not proposing to be amended. However, next year's budget will be offset by $56,400 due to the county's interlocal agreement with the city. And the remaining $75,200, which was part of that interlocal agreement, is offset during this current FY20 fiscal year. Another note is that abatement is not part of this budget. For the past few years, the general fund has offset the cost of abatement services. As I said previously, I'm happy to report that next year we'll not be requesting any general fund revenue to help us offset this cost. We're going to be utilizing the actual abatement fund that was been accruing over the last few years in order to use these services. You can move to the next slide. So future considerations, as discussed earlier, we have every intention of moving forward with the county city zoning changes and the transportation programs that we were unable to do this year with COVID-19. We just need to, we're working on them internally with staff. We just really need to wait until the right moment for that. In addition, property disposition ordinances that were passed earlier this year is something that the planning department, along with the economic development department and community development departments, are working on to implement. I do want to take a moment to discuss future development and redevelopment in the city of Deerfield Beach. Deerfield Beach is going through many changes. We've had a strong interest in the planned development zoning district that encourages new housing opportunities in the city. We've seen a lot of recent interest in new types of living opportunities east of Federal Highway for mid-rise residential. Changes like these bring with them additional opportunities for redevelopment, such as commercial uses and leisure uses to accommodate new residents. And along Dixie Highway, Pioneer Grove, and DBR districts continue to gain momentum. A new decorative fence and wall is almost complete, which improves the aesthetic view of the corridor. And staff continues for opportunities to improve the development potential of this area. Further west, we see a lot of redevelopment in the form of commercial business. Both the Target and Public plazas at Hillsborough and Powerline have been remodeled in what we call the Four Corners, and staff's reviewing opportunities to upzone the other two corners of this major intersection and hope to see additional redevelopment occur in that area. And finally, further south, we're seeing new housing opportunities. It's important that in order to nurture these developments, especially to the south with new residential that is more potentially to be family residential, that we consider the necessary amenities that that type of family housing requires. Potential development to the Tam-O'Shanter parcel, sidewalk and bike improvements, changes to aging and development along Sample Road, all requires a fresh eye and new attention. And I know that all you see as I do, the opportunities that await us. And I really ask that you truly consider, what does Deerfield Beach look like in the upcoming years to you as the development projects come before you? You know, as we grow into one of the more populated cities in the county, which we're on pace to do, will we provide those new amenities and opportunities to make Deerfield Beach the great place to live, work, and play that everyone wants it to be? Planning for those future ideas, you know, it takes time, it takes patience, and yes, it takes money. And those are some future considerations that we really need to think about with the planning department. You can go to the next slide. Really, finally, just to talk about the contingency budget, which which city manager has asked us to do. In order for us to move forward, what we would do is we would further cut consulting services, some of the items I talked about today, and what we would look forward to, moving planning departments forward, which is RSO DBR projects, that Vision Zero complete streets improvements and things like that. We do have a vehicle in request this year that we would potentially amend. We do have an intern position that we don't need to fill if that was the case. We do a tree inventory every year. We rotate that through 5 different sections. And what that really happens is, if in case of an event, hurricane, and we lose trees in the right of way, we have potential for recovery through FEMA. If we don't keep that updated, however, we don't have the ability to, to make those requests through FEMA. So that's something that we do on an annual basis. Of course, travel and training is reduced because, no one's going anywhere right now, and we would look at reducing office supplies. I think that's all. Yep. If you have any questions, I'm here to help.
Not hearing any questions.
I have a question. I do have a question.
You do? I'm sorry. I can't see when you raise your hand. You'll have to kind of wave
Did I
it at
fix it? Did I fix my background?
Yes, you did.
I'm really sorry about that.
That's okay. You look, yeah, you were completely opposite. The question I have is, I thought earlier this year during a commission meeting, we talked about renegotiating with code enforcement with regards to the percentages, but then today you said that there was no changes in the cost.
Not code enforcement, the building services. There's 2 separate contracts.
Okay.
Yeah, so right now we are in the middle of negotiations with CGA for building services.
Okay, but not for code compliance.
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Todd?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mr. Power, a couple questions. One, with respect to the code compliance, we had added an extra officer that was budgeted previously for the illegal dumping. Are you continuing with that position?
Yes, we would like to continue that position. It's been very successful.
Okay, because I know we had an update at a previous meeting, how that program was, or how that officer was working, and the metrics. Could in a future commission meeting, could you give us another update on that, please?
Of course.
Commissioner, that position actually is funded out of the solid waste fund because of the interaction that they have with the bulk trash, excuse me. So you'll actually hear more about that position tomorrow when we have Mr. Gressick go over the solid waste fund as well.
Okay. You had also mentioned during your presentation, Mr. Power, about the expansion of the Shady Tree Program, and we had a informal discussion before, you and I, when we talked about the expansion of that whether it was going to include HOAs or not. Do you know what the ultimate decision, if there has been, on that is?
Well, that decision is up to you and how we propose that to commission later on this year. I can discuss that with you offline if you want, but what we're looking to do, what code currently allows for doesn't allow for an expansion to the Shade Tree Program in the way we would like it to be, to provide additional opportunities for single family homeowners and potentially HOAs to have additional landscaping. So those will be code amendments that'll be coming forward to you later on this year for the commission to decide.
Okay, I look forward to future conversations with you then. And then I take that back. There's one last question. The question I thought Commissioner Hudak was going to ask was with respect to the negotiations with code compliance, because that contract is up for renewal. Are any savings that you're anticipating from that renewal, was that incorporated into your presentation?
Are you referring to code compliance or building services?
Yes, code compliance.
Code compliance. Well, we're not projecting any change to the contract for this upcoming year. Was that your question?
Yes, but I thought that was under renegotiation.
No, only building services is under renegotiation.
Not code compliance. Okay, I thought it was code compliance.
They're two separate contracts.
Yeah, I'm aware, but I thought it was the code compliance that was up, not the building services. Okay. That's my mistake. Okay, those were my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr.
Yes.
Power?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ben.
Like Commissioner Hudak and also like Commissioner Drosky, I too thought code compliance was a part of negotiation. So let me ask you this: why not?
When commissioners, when we do have the renewal on the code compliance contract, when that comes up for renewal, I believe it's within the next 12 months. I'm not sure. That contract renewal term will be reviewed by us and looked at for any cost savings that we may realize.
So what I'm hearing now, the only reason that it's not is because the contract is not up. Is that correct?
Not in the very near future, as far as I know.
Right. So that's why there can be nothing reflected in terms of negotiation with that, is what
Sure.
I'm asking.
That's correct.
And
Okay.
the difference between the two, is in the code compliance contract, we are paying flat rate per person, which is specifically listed, which is why the two different times we've come back to commission to request an additional employee, we've had to come back to commission to amend that contract. With the building services contract, it's not the same situation. They have to basically fill the positions that are necessary based on the work capacity. So we don't have a conversation about building and number of employees. We have that conversation about code compliance number of employees. The contract is coming on 5 years old. If we did renegotiate, I'm sure CGA would want to see additional dollars because of increases in costs, probably not less.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Power. With the negotiations as they relate to building, are you comfortable with the way this going in relation to the city's position?
Yes, and when we get forward to that, we'll provide a presentation at commission that will explain in great detail the way the current contract is working and the way the proposed contract will work and what advantages that brings forward to the city. Just to elaborate a little bit further on that, my concerns when it comes to renegotiating the contract is that in any year, the city is protected. So whether it's a very good year or a very bad year, the city is protected when it comes to the dollars that it needs to have in order for us to move forward when it comes to other related building services that we do. And so we'll talk about that at that time when it comes forward to commission, and I'll provide you all the information you need for that.
Thank you.
I have one more quick question.
Go ahead, Mr. Hudak, Commissioner Hudak.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So when we were earlier talking at a previous commission meeting, it had to do with the percentages that you were looking to go back to CGA with regards to the building services. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That reflected anywhere in your budget, those potential savings?
No. The way the budget is currently created is based off the current contract.
Okay, so if our negotiations are successful, then you would be able to realize some additional savings.
That could be correct, but the way the budget was presented to you tonight it's a little bit different with the building fund because it's about what do we think the total number is going to be. It's not a discussion about how it's divided. The way it's included into the slide, I mentioned a little earlier, it does kind of eschew the entire department because it is such a high number, and the revenue from the city isn't proportioned to that. So it does seem a little off when you talk about it. But no, we based it tonight's presentation is based off what is the projected building revenue for the next fiscal year. Now that is a complex dart throwing contest in which we discuss, current projects, future projects, the economy, whatever other things might be coming forward to the city, and determining based on past history and other items that are moving forward with South Florida, what we think that number is going to be.
Thank you.
Before we move on, Mr. Powers. Hello.
Yes, sir.
I want to compliment you on the personnel that was hired for the bulk. Mr. Baca, I keep pretty busy, but I must say, driving through the city, I see less bulk violations than there were a year ago. He's through the city every day looking for people that dump junk on inappropriate days, and he's doing an excellent job. There are areas in my district, there's been a total turnaround in the cleanliness and the appearance of the neighborhood. So you did well.
Thank you. I'll be sure to tell him that.
Thank you. There's nothing else. Mr. City Manager, who's next?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. We're going to move on to the Department of Ocean Rescue and Chief Mike Brown.
Good evening, Vice Mayor. Good evening, Commission and citizens of Deerfield Beach. I'm
Mike, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Good evening, Vice Mayor. Good evening, Commission. Good evening to the residents of Deerfield Beach. I am Ocean Rescue Chief Mike Brown, and I'm presenting the Ocean Rescue Department's proposed budget for fiscal year 21. Please. Fiscal year 20 achievements. We continue to maintain a safe beach. We had no deaths, fatalities this year, customer-friendly service, most elite competitive operation. Last year we were ranked top 5 in the nation. One of our standouts, as you saw and honored in the fall, Stephanie Eisenring won 2 national championships and represented Team USA and our city in the international stage at the World Championships. We replaced our aged wave runner for response in rough surf conditions. We educated over 500 children this year in ocean safety, weather conditions, and marine life at student government days and career days and such. We've established our United States Lifesaving Association USLA Deerfield Beach chapter, which enables our lifeguard specialists to certify and train our staff in surf rescue lifesaving, which is more advanced than the typical lifeguard certification, preparing our staff to be ready to respond to any emergency in the ocean. Our Deerfield Beach reputation and recruitment, being named 2018 Beach Patrol of the Year, having the Lifeguard of the Year, along with being recognized nationally, has attracted some of the top level lifeguards throughout seeking our department out to be potential lifeguards, and it has made our physical test very competitive test. Very difficult to be a member of our Beach Patrol at this time. We implemented a biannual will call test, enabling us to hire the top candidates as needed to fulfill operations. This helps us greatly that each time we have a position open, we do not have to go through the whole process of posting a position, holding a test, and going through all the interviews again. We can draw during that 6 months from our hires when we hold those tests in October and April of each year. Next slide. Some fiscal 21 goals. We like to get together with the Public Information Office and maybe create an educational video, share with the local hotels and tourists, and even the children in the schools. about safety and hazards specifically related to Deerfield Beach. As you know, we're pretty unique in the sense that we have a pier structure that goes out 900 feet into our ocean. And we also have very large rock piles, which are more exposed on our southern end. I feel like educating the public can relate in avoiding possible hazards and possible emergencies from occurring on our beach. We would like to provide our staff with some updated customer service training to better handle conflict resolution and diffuse escalating events. As you know, we've been out there since day one with COVID-19, keeping people off our beach for the first 2 months, and now letting people on our beach trying to follow CDC guidelines. It's a different environment. It's a different type of crowd that we're dealing with now. We have people that get very upset, that do not want to listen to rules. We have everybody who owns a dog now, it's considered a service dog. So we deal with a lot out there, and I think some good customer service training to help our guys to diffuse some of these events from getting any nastier than they are. We'd also like to create a critical stress debriefing program to assist our lifeguards after responding to serious emergencies. Myself and several lifeguards, you have a serious emergency out there, whether it's CPR or what have you. A lot of times you're put right back up in the lifeguard stand, and you got to finish the rest of your day, while your adrenaline's still pumping and you just responded to this emergency. So putting together, maybe getting together with the fire department and putting together this type of program where we can talk about what happened, give the guys a chance to, de-stress after, performing this emergency would help greatly. And I think would help some of the anxiety levels out there with our lifeguards. And lastly, to have all full-time staff certified as personal watercraft operators by the completion of this fiscal year. We have just about all of our full-time so far certified. We have a course each year we send 3 individuals to, and hopefully by next year I'll have all the staff certified. This is to perform rescues using our wave runner as both a rescue operator and both as a rescue swimmer on the back of this. So next slide, please. Our operating budget, as you can see, overall, there's a decrease 2.5. The way we accumulated that with our personal services, we currently have 2 vacant positions that have been vacant since April. We continue to freeze them going into next year to help with costs. We've eliminated our 4 part-time positions that we had, and we're going to cover those hours with will call lifeguards. Operational expenditures, we continue to decrease each year, skimming away, but still we need to operate and have the right equipment to perform rescues. And as you can see, a capital outlay, we're asking for a vehicle this year, an ocean rescue truck. Next slide, please. Future considerations beyond. As I mentioned, we purchased a wave runner this year. We had a 2012 wave runner. It cost us several thousands of dollars over the last couple of years to maintain. In that salt environment, things don't last long. So we have a 5-year plan moving forward. Next year, of course, we're asking for a truck. And that following fiscal year 22, we'd be asking for an ATV. I'd like you to consider permanent daylight savings if the state mandates that. That would be consideration. We'd have more daylight hours out there, possibly going from 8-hour days to 10-hour days on the beach until 7 p.m. We currently do so during daylight savings from March to July with only 4 towers. As you know, new fire station 75, it's falling apart. We are upstairs in our headquarters is upstairs with station 75. And lifeguard tower replacement and the additional tower to the north. Unfortunately, we were budgeted to start construction in April on that new tower to the north, which have given us full coverage of our beach, which has been a long time goal of mine and our department. So next slide, please. I always give you guys some of our basic stats: water rescues, medical responses, and boat and vessel extrusions. 2018 was a very rough water condition year. As you can see with our medical and water responses, 2018, part of becoming the Beach Patrol of the Year, we also stepped up our level of training, and we're trying to prevent more things and use a more preventative approach, which I think is the indication in the lower end numbers in the water rescues and medical for 19. 2020, COVID hit, 2 months with no one on our beach during the busiest months of the year during spring break are the reason why our numbers are so low. If you look at boat and vessel extrusions, we put out vessel intrusion buoys in 2018, 2019, as you saw, the level dropped significantly. We were on pace to, if not match that, if not go lower, till COVID hit. Our pier was closed. So we had a lot of boats intruding into that area to fish for bait. So that kind of raised our numbers, spiked our numbers a little bit. Next slide, please. The contingency budget. As directed by our city manager, we had to come up with a 10% decrease. So how did I go about this in order to reduce by 10%? Not replacing our truck, 16-year-old vehicle. You know, what's the impact? More repair costs. Last year, our drivetrain totally fell out while we were pulling out of Rehab Yamaha on Dixie Highway. So we, have to consider that moving forward. Our 5 to 7 daylight savings shift. Currently, we keep 4 towers open from March, I believe March 8th, when the daylight savings changes throughout July 31st, safety during those hours. I'm talking about eliminating that to save costs. Aside from those two, the only thing left for me with a $48,000 operating budget is personnel. So that means we would have to cut lifeguard positions. And, the impact of that is overall training, readiness, and beach coverage. So on that note, any questions for anybody?
I have one, if I may.
Yes, Vice Mayor.
Of the rescues you've made, were they all successful?
Yes, sir.
We didn't lose anybody then.
We did not lose anyone. I'm very proud to
Well,
say.
congratulations, job very well done.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Preston?
Mr. Brown, on your second slide, it says create critical stress debriefing program. So my question is, do you have that in place now, or are you going to create that?
We would like to create it. We do not have that in place.
Well, let me just tell you, I'm glad that that's there. You need that.
Absolutely.
You need that. That is so important to the overall goals and objectives. In the fire department, there was a time where we did not have that. You were just left to deal with whatever happened when you have a death or whatever. You just deal with it as though it just was a part of your job. It is not a part of their job. They need to be debriefed. God forbid you lose a kid or you lose someone on that beach. It affects you. These are human beings. These are human beings. And it's important that they let that go. Other than that, here's what happens. They take it home with them. And it becomes a part of, their personality, becomes a part of their makeup, and they have to deal with it. Everybody doesn't process situations like that the same. And then sometimes it can end up tragically for them. I'm happy to see that there, because that is an important a part of how you're looking at dealing with your people. And I know you, Mike. You're a really sharp guy, and you really care about your people. I am so happy that that's in there. You need to get that done. That needs to happen. That critical stress debriefing is vital. That is vital, or else your people will suffer in the end if you don't do that. You have my full support on that.
Thank you sincerely, Commissioner Preston. Sincerely, thank you.
I have a question as well.
Commissioner Hudak, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. I second what Commissioner Preston said. I think that's vitally important. As we opened up our meeting today, we lost another firefighter today.
Absolutely.
And I know that, our chief is going to get some counseling out there, but they're in a high stress position. People think, oh, well, they're just lifeguards are just hanging out on the beach. But, those of us who have a little bit of knowledge know it's a potentially high stressful position. And, they are faced with life and death situations. And fortunately, as you stated earlier, you were able to rescue all of those individuals. but there's going to become a time when you don't. And
Absolutely.
individuals are going to need that support because,
That's
as
right.
Commissioner Preston said, individuals handle it differently. So I'm glad that, you see the need for it. And again, I support that as well. I think it needs to be a top priority for you. Couple of questions. The buoys that we have out in the water that stop the boats from the intrusion. I was out at the beach, I want to say on Friday, visiting our new residents, the birds out there, and noticed we'll talk about that another time. But noticed that there were at least 3 or 4 of those buoys that had already washed ashore. So I think it's great that we have those buoys out there, but apparently there is a lack of a program to maintain them. Is that your budget or is that a different budget? Because I think it's great that we're doing something like that, but if we don't maintain it, it really doesn't accomplish much.
Mike, I can go ahead and answer that. Commissioner, yeah, we recognize that those buoys will eventually need a maintenance schedule, but currently there is not any dollars appropriated in either in Mike Brown's budget under Ocean Rescue or within coastal management for a maintenance plan on those buoys. So we've had discussions, Mike, myself, Patrick, on ways that we might be able to get that done here in the short term, but long term, we will need a maintenance program for those to make sure that they that when they do wash up on shore, and they will,
Yeah.
That we can get out there and get them replaced on a regular basis.
And the last thing I want to say is on your slide 6, reduction in staff, and I really do not support a reduction in staff in any of our departments. I think we as leaders in this city, our people are our most important assets, and I want to support them and do everything that we can before we look at reducing staff, reducing pay, as I said yesterday. I think it's vitally important. I appreciate you putting that on the page, but to me, that shouldn't be an option. So I just want to let you know, I think all of our staff is vitally important. And I want to make sure that myself as a commissioner does everything that I possibly can to save every position that we can.
Thank you sincerely, Commissioner. Thank you.
If I might jump in on that. I feel the same way for this reason. If we can do without these people, why were they hired in the first place? They obviously serve a function for the city and the citizens of this city. Let's respect that, find money elsewhere. But if we hired these people, we have a reason for hiring them. Cutting them just overloads the people that are left to pick up the work, if it can be done. Again, I support the other 2 commissioners that we should save all of the personnel that we absolutely can. Are there any other questions? If not, City Commissioner, who's next?
Oh, as your city manager, I'd like
Yeah.
to bring forward our next presentation, which would be Chief Matt Pelletieri for fire rescue. Thank you.
Did I accidentally promote you, David?
You did, Vice Mayor. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if I should say thank you, but
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, if you're watching remotely, Vice Mayor Parnas, Commissioner Drosky, Commissioner Hudak, Commissioner Preston, City Manager, city staff, fellow residents, visitors to the city of Deerfield Beach. On behalf of Broward Sheriff's Office, Sheriff Gregory Tony, Fire Chief Joseph Fernandez, and as your district fire chief, Matt Pelletieri, I'm going to make this presentation and start off with the next slide with our achievements.
Hey, Matt,
Sir.
before you get started, I
Yes.
just want you to know that I know this is hard for you, and I just want you to know that I know that, and this is difficult, and you have our support.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Tough day for fire rescue today, so.
Yes.
Just to begin under our fiscal year 20 achievements, we were able to maintain our ISO 1 rating, our Commission of Fire Accreditation International, or CAFI, and CASH, which is a Commission on Accreditation of Ambulance Services. This is with support of the City of Deerfield Beach and this commission, allowing us to do the things that we do on the streets, which we are measured by the following disciplines. We do a self-assessment of our service, our organization, about the service we provide, including fire suppression, life safety, public education, hazardous material response, and property conservation. Again, all this wouldn't be possible without our working relationship and partnership with the City of Deerfield Beach. So I thank you all. This was on my FY20 last year, and it enabled us to go forward and achieve all these achievements, which are recognized through the entire country. So we've accomplished all of those, and they're very tough to hold on to. So again, I thank you for the support going forward. Also to note that in our fire inspections and fire plan reviews, our goal was 100% and to complete on an annual basis. With your, again, one support from last year's FY20, the extra inspector helped us achieve that goal. We're on our way. As of May 20, we were already 60% to 100%. So I'm confident that we're going to be right on the bubble or right there come October. So again, that's another collaborative effort to increase our rollout of fire inspections, which does generate quite a bit of revenue. And I'll show that later in another slide. Going forward, our technology is super important to us. We've had a change. And again, once again, it was an FY20. Our Zoll monitors, our Zoll handheld computers rolled out for our patient care reporting system, which is all the newest technology, latest technology, speed, safety for firewalls. So patient information and information is secure, which is very important. So again, another rollout that we've completed as far as an achievement go. We're very proud of that. Thank you again. Also in our service, we also test fire hydrants, test on an annual basis, and that's 100% completion. Within the city of Deerfield Beach, we have 2,157 city hydrants, 614 hydrants in the unincorporated county, which is really our area, but maintained by Broward County, that part of the water supply, and 55 in the town of Hillsborough Beach. So these are completed on an annual basis at 2,826 total. Just so you know, in efforts with Alan Fathy and Patrick Altley, they also test the city hydrants. So this is a collaborative effort, and that really is evaluated by our ISO rating. So this is a good working relationship. Also in our FY20, another great achievement is the distribution of the P25 radios to all operational staff. And that included fire rescue, lifeguards, and DLE. And we also were able to secure the contracts for the P25 compliant for station alerting system. The alerting system was to be into this 21-year budget, but with great assistance of Broward Sheriff's Director of Finance, we were able to pull it out of this year's budget at the sum of $400,000. So that is a considered item that will not be proposed in the FY21. We were able to take care of it this year to get us 100% compliance. So I needed to share that with you because we were able to make that work. Also new to our city services is our Fireboat 102, which it is docked just outside of Sullivan Park. It does provide fire and EMS services on the dry land and on the waterway. And the interesting thing about this is not only do we have one boat, which the sheriff's office gave us 2 boats, so we do have a backup at no cost to the city. And also note that we have mutual aid and an auto aid agreement that we've signed with the city of Boca, that they help us with water rescue. And so does our sister boat out of Port Everglades. And we work with Boat 49 out of City of Fort Lauderdale. So we have a lot of water resources out there. Interesting note is 50% of all water emergencies and rescues happen along the waterways of Deerfield Beach and town of Hillsborough Beach in Broward County. So 50% of the water accidents are in our jurisdiction in Broward County. So this is a needed resource asset. I'm proud to say that it's up and running. It is here. And it's a big accomplishment for our organization and for the city that we serve. Also, we also are in receipt of a brand new helicopter, which is called Firestar helicopter that does EMS trauma transports. It's dedicated to fire and EMS. We sistered with BSO police for many years, but now we have separate units that work in conjunction and work together for full service. That is also up and running. That helicopter has been added to Deerfield Beach Battalion 102, which is our battalion. It's running out of Pompano Air Park. So it's part of our deployment in the North End. So another win in as far as operations go going forward. This year, we also completed our Operation Santa. We did a organized effort on scheduling with the Public Information Office with the city. We met our objective of bringing Santa and helpers to many parks and saw many of children, very successful, something that worked out very well. We're all very proud of. Also throughout this year, due to age of vehicles and due to the age of the fleet and the cost, we had to decommission 4 vehicles that went over to City Garage to be put out on auction. They are no longer available to provide a frontline service or a secondary service. And this is because the city does own the vehicles, they go to the city for auction. So they've been delivered over the year. And shortly, I'll explain that we're getting ready to do a few more here in a future slide here. Also going forward, our public education doesn't really stop. We've had an increase to 30–40% of requests for public education. Stop the Bleed, which I think we're all pretty familiar with. The schools have requested it, and we're going to do it again, perform it as next year. House Bill 275 that came out of state Tallahassee now requires students to have this program to graduate high school. So it is House Bill 275. So the Stop the Bleed program is now a necessity that has to be taught into the schools. We're handling that with our public education department and with our on-staff personnel. So for future considerations, I'll speak on that just very momentarily. The Ready Now program, we have great success. We've opened up both those programs to the public, and we've held a few classes over at the North Broward Hospital in their training chamber over there, which prepares people for emergency, non-emergency throughout your home or throughout your workplace. It's a really good program that we was born out of our public ed department, and they launched it out of Deerfield, very successful. We also have a junior fire starters program. Unfortunately, we had to refer a few kids to the program. It's a very intense program, but it's an evil necessity, and it's a very good program. So hopefully the kids get a lot out of it and they come out on the other side of the obsession with fire. So also our car seat program runs constantly. We do car seat installations. They occur here at the main fire station with a scheduled response. The car seats are generally free. They just ask for a donation to help with the program, with the pub ed program. CPR is provided along with senior services education. All have had 100% completion anytime we've been requested to provide these services, whether it's helping elderly get in and out of their vehicle, how to use a stairwell, work on some balance issues around the home. Our public educators go out and they work with these seniors, and the CPR programs are done on a scheduled basis. Next slide, please. Okay, FY21 goals going forward. We'd like to continue our higher education and training on a monthly and annual basis.
Oh, God. I thought that was my screen.
What's that? I'm sorry.
I thought that was my screen.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. To continue our higher education and training on a monthly and annual basis with our technology that's ever changing, especially with our protocols and annual training that's required of us, whether it be online or it's out in the field where it's performance-based objectives that we complete. So we maintain that and keep our CEUs and keep our education in the current times and the rollout of new protocols. Of course, we want to maintain our ISO 1 rating, our CAFE rating, and our CAS rating that measures all our disciplines, which I talked about earlier. So that requires a lot of ongoing training and disciplines and behaviors that we are accustomed to performing on a daily basis here. Going forward, the fire inspections with 100% completion during the calendar year, I spoke on that briefly a minute ago. I think we're going to be very close, if not on the button. So that's worked out very well. And the implementation of the cancer presumptive and COVID-19 procedures and protocols, we know that we're all navigating at a different time today. We have to think beyond, as far as our cancer presumptive, as I pitched the last go around, but the COVID-19 is now something new that we're all dealing with, including citywide. So whether, it goes to the sanitizing of the facilities, the sanitizing the vehicles, personal hygiene, meaning hand washing, our PPE practices, and that goes for everyone that either comes in and out of the building and in our private lives. So things have changed for us quite a bit going forward. So our goals is to continue to educate. We've done some instructional videos with the city PIO that were very, very helpful and I think very informative, and they went out and made an impact. Implement the technological advancements for training performance for all our performance objectives, and to keep our firefighter and paramedics into practice of all the pre-hospital medical protocols. Under our medical direction, sometimes our protocols change on a daily basis. During COVID-19, they sometimes would change twice a day. So rollouts would come out with different PPE procedures or sanitizing procedures. And along with our cardiac and all of our ailments that we deal with as far as medical emergencies, our protocols are very active. We have a very active medical director, gives us a lot of leeway. And we are very aggressive with our EMS program. And also I'm going to evaluate our community emergency response team, which is our CERT team, the program to increase volunteerism and activity within our city. We have a team that needs some revitalization and use some new recruits. So we'll look at ways to start recruiting some free volunteers and have some workshops here going forward. Also, my goal is this year is to decommission 5 other vehicles, and 2 of them are golf carts that, once again, FY20, you guys, the commission, you did approve for us to purchase new ones. They are here. We're waiting for them to go in service. 2 inspector vehicles due to age and mechanical problems, and 1 rescue truck. So these will go to city garage for future auction over the next few months. I'm hoping to have those completed in the next 2 months. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, our operating budget. So up is, you can see the recommendations for our operating expenditures, the changes, our percentiles, our capital outlay, and our overall. So our operating expenses, if you go to the bottom left, some of these I've listed here are some increases, and I'll get into like the laundry gear due to the cancer presumptive. After calls, they have to be professionally cleaned. So our expense went up a few $1,000s for that. Our gas, oil, lube went up. Now these are already in our consideration from Broward Sheriff's Office, but these are some of the increased costs that that are in the operating expenses. Hurricane supplies for our hurricane deployments, fire prevention books, which our inspectors have to keep up with as much compliance as they can with the latest editions. They do print most of the printable materials that they can get their hands on, but sometimes we need to purchase books. I have $4,500 in there for fire hose replacement. Every year our trucks are tested for ladder testing, pump testing, and hose testing. We're replacing hose that failed pump testing that is completely out of service that we cannot use. And we roll over to the capital outlay expenses. Machine equipment is for the replacement of 2 of our special events trailers, our trailers that you'll see at the Renaissance Fest, Surfers for Autism, Founders Day. These provide treatment areas and transportation for the golf carts to go to these events, so we can stage them there and have walk-up treatment areas for walk-up patients at all these special events. Thermal imagers that are non-repairable, there's 2 of those at that cost. Those are thermal imaging cameras that we bought many years ago, and these need replacement that we can, when we do our search and rescue, we can do body heat signatures and locate animals, human beings, anyone that could be hidden within a hazardous environment. The VoIP request is for the new Station 51. That's going to be for technology at the $1,700. And then we'll get into with the city manager and a little bit about the consideration of some purchases of emergency vehicles going forward that we'll touch here momentarily. Next slide, please. So with these future considerations, our goal is to partner with the city to create a master plan for the fire stations addressing the building's deficiencies, including Fire Station 4, which is 62 years of age, Fire Station 66, which is 42 years of age, Fire Station 75, that is 40 years of age. And right now I'm working with the grant writer with the city who reached out for me for Station 75, which was promising. She found a way to maybe purchase some grant monies to assist with some of the improvements. And Fire Station 11, I think I heard Priscilla speak of the trailer lease and replacement. So things are working extremely well. Had a great relationship with Hamid and Jeff Brazil, working towards some resolution to a lot of these. So we're getting there. We understand that we had to make some considerable changes to our requests due to the economic times that we're navigating through. So we made some adjustments, and we're going to create a plan and look at future repair requests going forward that when we're in a little bit better economic position. Also, our fleet replacement schedule to look beyond is our emergency fleet replacement for frontline service trucks should be 5 to 7 years old. Currently, we have 4 that are over 7 years old, and they're over 11 to 15 years old, and we are rehabbing those to be spares to keep them as a spare status. The fire engine fleet replacement is usually a 10-year plan. We usually try to get 10 years out of a frontline fire truck. Right now we have one over 10 years old, and we have no spares left in the city. We've had to decommission some of those trucks I was talking about earlier. So currently we have no spare engines. So we do have reliance upon BSO fleet to let us borrow some of their trucks. And because the city owns their vehicles, we have to keep a reserve of that in-house. But right now we do have access to a reserve truck as we see necessary, whether it's down for maintenance, accidents, or some type of just regular scheduled fleet maintenance. Also, future considerations is just to keep an eye on the fire assessment fee rate with the study. You know, I worked with the consultant quite a bit before, answered a lot of questions, learned quite a bit about the process. So just kind of keep our eye on it and try to just understand how all that came together and the comparisons to other cities and where we rate ourselves. Also, today's difficult and new times that we are navigating through as a people and as a society is our policies regarding PPE and WMD supplies. So we look at our cache of supplies that we keep on hand. We keep minimum amounts of supplies on hand. We perform mass casualty shootings with our Department of Law Enforcement partners and shoot houses. And it's just due to the recent events that have happened in this country, our way of doing business has changed. So we keep this in mind. We make sure we have everything on hand, especially as COVID could ramp up or ramp down. You know, right now it's getting quite interesting again. So we need to have that cache of supplies for our responders. And also our future watch on the technologies and life-saving emergency services that really positions us to do quite a bit. Going over to the next slide, please. So our contingency budget, after speaking with the city manager, probably late February in one of our meetings or early March, he started thinking about and kind of preaching to us, keep an eye out for your budgets to see, let's see how the economy is going to react to the shutdown of businesses and what the revenues are going to look like. So in preparation, I didn't pitch a few things in the consideration because I read the message loud and clear. And because I'm living it on this side of fire rescue, I kind of see the reality of what we are getting ready to face. So what I was going to ask for this year and did not was administrative personnel, an executive officer, a public educator, as I was speaking about the House bill, and the education, which we are we're sharing a educator from down south which is working out well with our personnel right now. I pulled a pickup truck that needed to be replaced out of the budget to move the trailers from point A to point B. With the help of the director of BSO Finance, I was able to purchase out of FY20's budget the routers I asked for last year, the station alerting I asked for last year, and the command vehicle we asked for last year. Those have all been secured. So I was able to pull out and remove my initial wish list of $1,023,900, which left just the 5,026,403 to roll into the outlay that I was looking for this budget year. So we do have a slight increase of 567 going forward to achieve all those items, but we were able to secure most of them with the financing and help of downtown. So that I was able to pull that off the consideration. So that gave me a savings of 1.885 without asking. And it's just shy of 5% of what the city manager did ask us to try to produce. So I just came shy of 5% without putting it up here for scrutiny or debate. We just pulled it and knowing that this is where we were going to head. Also on the next slide for calls for service. Right here, I just show a calls for service, which is showing you what our service does look like and what our numbers do look like. So for call for service, we had in 15,722, 1,100 of those were EMS calls. So we've kind of trending and we're seeing the pattern kind of grab up a little bit. So I use the rules of percentages here. So I put us right at 16,000 for potential for 20. Now that can be higher or a little bit lower, but it just goes to show you how our calls for service from 18, 19, and 20 kind of march out the same. In rare occasions in previous years, we've had a drop of 250 or 300 calls, but no large amounts. Our building inspections, we perform 5,658 a year. That's what was out there on the books, and we're looking at doing just over the 4,000 and get to the 5,200 mark or 5,600 mark. We're hopeful by the end of October, as we talked about earlier. Our hydrant graph, if you see, is consistent to 28, 26. That's completed 100% on an annual basis. And the plan review is just under 2,000 fire plan reviews. That generates a few $100,000 a year. That will go on to the next slide, please. So on our pie chart here, it's all depicted in percentages and colors if it's clear on your screen. We bring in fire assessment fees of $11,287,453 at the 36%. Fire plan review, $190,000, brings in 1%. Fire inspections, $375, 1%. The Hillsborough contract at $803, 114, 3%. Our EMS transports are just shy of $3 million, which is usually our consistent collection rate for EMS transports, which brings in $15,656,102 into the general fund. That puts us about 50% of our asking budget. So we proudly produce quite a bit of revenue through the services that we provide. And I will leave it at that. If there's any questions that I can answer.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What is the number of BSO fleet reserve engines?
I'm sorry, Commissioner. What was the last part of that? The number of
BSO fleet reserve engines, the ones that BSO have themselves in reserve?
I think currently they just procured a couple. I think they have 3 to 4.
Okay, so only 3 to 4 engines.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in the city of Deerfield Beach if we don't have an engine and one of a reserve maybe is out to someone else? What happens to our city?
Well, we have a couple options that the fleet director has worked with me on. He'll put us in a Quint truck or another reserve truck. Weston is like in the same situation, to give you an example, like us, where Weston purchases their own apparatus and Deerfield purchases their own apparatus. The other contract cities go through the BSO fleet services.
Mm-hmm.
We have not been in a pickle yet that we were unable. I mean, we've been down 2 engines and able to secure 2 engines. They've been very helpful and forthcoming with us. So we haven't been in that 0 point yet.
But
If it were to happen, if it were to happen, I'd have to distribute the personnel to other apparatus.
yes. So
I would have to put a unit out of service.
yeah, and so that, I mean, what I'm getting to is that because you know, we lack all of the resources that we need, our residents at any given time, given the perfect storm, is at risk. Is that not right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So just as a little back history, Commissioner, in 2008, when the economy was bad, 07, 08, the 5-year plan for purchasing apparatus was on hold, understandably why during that time. And we just truly never got caught up, but slowly but surely working with the city manager, we were able to make some purchases this past year. From FY20, we replaced all of Station 4's apparatus has been replaced. We're just a few pieces away from having the fleet where it needs to be and 1 spare away to give us that safety buffer. But, and I think the city manager will touch on that, correct?
Well, I'm a little afraid, Chief, because I don't know that you'll be able to tell a resident while you're watching their house burn down that we're in some sort of a crisis for a reserve engine, and that's why this happened. So
Right.
that's a tough situation.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to just say a few things, if I may. One of the things about having the contracted service from the Broward Sheriff's Office is, in a lot of cases, the cost of the cost, right? And there's not as much flexibility for me in terms of managing those costs because they're not, an in-house service. That said, Matt has done a very good job of controlling the cost within his budget and what he is able to do on his end. Additionally, he is right. We have worked very closely together over the past couple of years, even while I was in the capacity of the assistant city manager, to devise a capital replacement cost to systematically replace the fleet and get it to the point where it needs to be over time. We've been able to do that here for now. This will be the 3rd year, and realize that within this year, the current budget includes 1 engine and 2 rescues, amounting to $1.7 million, I believe. Is that correct, Matt? 1.7.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So, it'd be great if we could do all 4 of those large dollar purchases this year. But I looked at Matt and I said, Matt, if you had to give up one thing in this capital, what could it be? What could we do without? And as he said, for all the time that we have been without these vehicles, sometimes being down 2 engines at one time, the county has come through and provided those engines. That there is the benefit of being with the Broward Sheriff's Office, is the regional assets that we're able to tap into when we need some assistance. And so we've been successful thus far. We'll be able to get 1 more engine. We have 1 that we haven't received yet, I don't think. I think we got 1 in the hopper still. Is that correct?
It's probably going in service in the next few days, Station 4.
Right. We got 1 coming in, Station 4, in the next few days. We'll be placing an order for 1, hopefully at the beginning of this coming fiscal year. And we'll continue to replace the fleet at a responsible schedule that we can absorb within our budget every time we need to. It's about, the ability, and as even Chief Brown talked about, creating that capital replacement schedule so the costs are expected, year over year, and we're not pushing the budget limits in one direction too far above and below, and we can maintain consistency, also keep the fleet up and the maintenance costs down.
Hey, Chief.
Yes.
When that engine goes into service
Yes, sir.
at Station 4, will the engine it's replacing go into reserve?
Yes, what we're going to do is, after that conversation the city manager and I had, I called the fleet director because when he asked me what I could do without, it was with a heavy decision to make, but I also did my due diligence by contacting Fleet to make sure, and with Chief Holness, our finance chief, and they said not to worry, we will supply, we'll get you through, don't worry, and Fleet agreed that they can nurse that truck at least another year for sure. The last 2 E1 engines that we decommissioned this past year, there was just no longer any parts for them. So they have salvaged things that we can do to keep it as a spare. We try not to use it as a front line. When it is a front line, it's for a very short period of time. But we also have in our toolbox is we do have, and the city manager touched on it, is we have access to regional assets that I can bring up from our regional station to backfill. But again, if I was down to answer your original question, I could move assets and I could bring a regional up here if I needed to at a moment's notice down one of our Fort Lauderdale regional assets that could backfill if we needed it. So, but eventually, because we do purchase our fleet, we do need to replenish, and we'll push it off a year.
Thank you.
Economy goes.
I have a question, Vice Mayor. If
Go
I-
ahead,
Thank you.
Commissioner Hudak.
Appreciate it. Matt, good presentation. Couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I didn't see anywhere on your slide deck a program that's very near and dear to my heart and my son's heart is the fire cadet program. So
Yes.
I'm hoping that that's not a program that you're looking to disband.
Negative. That program is run through our administration, Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services. They get to go anywhere as your son does within the program and do the ride times and go to schooling and so on and so forth. But that's all done down south and controlled out of that budget.
I see.
Uniforms and gear and so on.
Just making sure.
Oh, no, it's safe. That's a safe program.
You talked about the Stop the Bleed program, and when I was with SHL, I went through that program. It's a great program. And I'd like to propose that we look at putting a certain number, if not every member of city staff through that program, because it's a tremendous program, especially with the environment that we're faced with these days. So if we can consider something like that, I think it's something that people would really take advantage of. The main question I have is, so BSO has a fleet services program that a lot of cities participate in, where I'm presuming they rent the vehicle and BSO is responsible for purchasing it. And I was just curious why we go the route of purchasing a vehicle. I mean, $800,000 for a vehicle is a lot of money. And if we're going to be with BSO for the foreseeable future, why are we not, taking advantage of this program so that we don't have these huge outlays of funds? Considering the status of our fire departments, we really got to look at capital investments for them in the near future. And so I was just curious why we chose to purchase our vehicles as opposed to, and I'm presuming it's some kind of a lease option.
Yeah, let me touch on that.
I can answer that. I'll answer that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to touch the Stop the Bleed too, so let me have that when you're done.
Sure, absolutely. So Commissioner, we do lease purchases on these large dollar capital expenses. So we do finance them over the period of 5 to 7 years. It depends on the interest rates and what the banks will allow. So they are leased or purchased over a period.
But
so Commissioner,
this BSO fleet services that other cities take advantage of or participate in, why is that not an option for Deerfield?
The only difference there is that BSO is buying them on behalf of that city and that district. In our case, we are purchasing them ourselves.
So wouldn't they have economies of scale, advantages to purchasing these vehicles as opposed to one city?
so want me to touch on that, Dave?
Sure, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, I'm sorry. So yes, so we have Andrew and I have briefly discussed some options going forward, so that if we wanted to switch our letter of understanding, which is up for negotiation this year, renewal. If the city manager decided and you all decided to portion to Broward County Fleet, BSO Fleet, then the purchases of vehicles would just pop up on consideration in a timely manner when they need replacing. That's an option, but I can't know for sure without asking the question that if they purchase 6 or 7 or 4 at a time, how the price does adjust by buying economies of scale, global economies of scale of these. So that would be a question that we could have during the LOU negotiation if you'd like to pursue. I know that the city manager and I briefly discussed it. And to also touch on the Stop the Bleed program, Commissioner.
One more thing.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
But Commissioner Hudak, the contract that they're using to purchase their vehicles is the same contract we're using. And we have run into instances where they'll be making their purchase and we'll piggyback off that in the quoting process. And we'll get our quotes at the same time they are. It's just not different. It's just addressed to a different entity. It could be addressed to the city of Deerfield Beach, or it could be addressed to the Broward Sheriff.
So they don't get a price break because they purchased 4 engines where we only purchased 1?
Again, typically, we're making the purchases at the same time as they are, because as budgets are approved at the beginning of the fiscal year,
Okay.
that's when you want to get them in, because you want to make sure that you're getting the pricing that has been reserved for that model year. If you wait
Okay.
too long in the fiscal year, you miss that opportunity, your prices could escalate. So most of these purchases anyway, as we get the quotes, because we're still getting the quotes from downtown fire rescue fleet. They're putting that engine together for us, or the paperwork at least, I should say.
Okay.
So as they're getting all those quotes, we're getting them all together at the same time. They're getting, purchase orders, whether, like I said, it's issued from us or it's issued from the Broward Sheriff's Office. We're realizing the same economies of scale. We've seen it in the past where we've gotten price discounts because, hey, yeah, we're going to be ordering 3, jump on board, give me the PO, and you get the same price. We've seen that happen.
Okay.
Any other questions?
You want to Stop the Bleed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the Stop the Bleed, sorry, Vice Mayor.
Go ahead.
The program was offered to city employees, and we did hold 2.
Oh, good.
We did hold 2 classes over at CDC, and had a lot of employees voluntarily show up. Went very well. Great reception, and we'll continue to do so.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Commissioner Drosky?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hudak.
Oh, gee, killing me.
Chief, let
Yes,
me
sir.
preface my comment with, I'm not ever interested in compromising public safety, but if I look at the numbers in your presentation, which is page number 3 of your presentation, but it's actually number 4 of the PDF, your budget actually increases total by 1.7%, whereas all the other department heads so far have sharpened their pencils and made cuts. So if I'm one of your colleagues and I've made cuts to my budget and you haven't, why is that not fair?
We cut where we could at some of the items that we could cut away at. Some of the expenses that went up in our operating or costs that we truly could not control. The only other, as far as cuts go, there's really nothing more to give. We gave what we could and pulled off all the items that were on the list to go forward. And I was able to purchase a lot of the future items for FY21, the tune of $500,000 into the FY20 budget. So that was considered some of the savings I was able to pull out. But there was still, I believe, a $566,000 increase from last year to this year on the consideration, which would have been an additional $500,000 if I wasn't able to do the work I did to get those changes made. Budget.
No, I understand. I mean, the personnel services went up by 800,000 there. So just to offset that, you had to have some cuts elsewhere. I get that, but I'm just saying is just as a concept of fairness. I think, you know, maybe you need to take a second look going forward. I don't know, you know, how we can ask the other departments to take a hit and fire rescue not. Now, if you're going to tell me it's going to compromise public safety, then you and I will have a separate conversation, and I will, you know, back down on that. But I think we need to all look very close at what is being presented to us.
Yeah, as far as the personnel services, I can speak on that. Those were contractual obligations that were met over this past year with Broward Sheriff's Office and the local unions, which would have caused the increase. And some of it was retroed monies that was given to the employees because of overlapping years of negotiation, and the new sheriff arrival. So some of those were settled late, and spread over a 2-year period. So that's kind of a larger lump sum that the deal was done within this budget year. That would be the change as far as personnel services. As far as the operating-
I'm playing devil's advocate with you here too, because if
Yeah,
you're not going to hear
understood.
it from me, you're going to hear it from others, and you know that.
Mm-hmm. No, understood. The only other places we have to cut is what services you want to cut. And that would be, I wouldn't recommend, the services that we have on the street right now are essential. We run thin as it is. So it could be a side conversation if you like, but yeah, I mean, that's all we have really left to contend with.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you being upfront.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah. When it comes to fire rescue, and most of the calls are EMS, I don't know how we cut that. Do we issue 3 Band-Aids instead of 2? Would that make it a better service? No. Cutting personnel so we don't have enough personnel to man the ambulances? I don't think so. We're talking about emergency services. I've been to several fires. Am I correct, Chief Pelletieri? You've been
Yes,
there.
sir.
And I don't see cutting that department at all, in my opinion. They need the tools to save lives. Where would you cut? How would you cut? And how would you maintain safety? Before I would vote or criticize the budget of that department, I would ask any commissioner or anybody else to show me where cutting that department is going to save more lives. Are there any other questions?
Yes,
Ms. Commissioner Preston.
yes. Well, first of all, Vice Mayor, I think it is right that my colleague asked those questions. I mean, that's what these budget hearings are about. It is right for Commissioner Drosky to ask questions and bring about an awareness so that if there can be a cost saving, that we look at that. But you're also right as well. You're dealing in a situation that is it's very, very challenging. And another thing that we have to keep in mind, that the fire department and life safety actually brings in revenue. They're not an organization that sits as an outlier that is dependent totally upon, city revenue. They bring in a profit actually. And but the only thing is there are costs that I heard the chief said something about, gas going up. It's hard to determine how those that you can control them in relation to building a budget. Then you have different equipment that is associated to firefighting that will allow them to do their job more efficiently. So we have to keep in mind that it is life safety, and if it gets down to it, you're right, Vice Mayor. Where would you cut? Because then you would be buying a level of service. So that would be wrong to say, well, you cut here, you cut here, and you cut here. Now, when the incident comes, you can't expect them then to say, okay, you should have been able to do this. This is a tough situation, but it's life safety. And when people dial 911, they're not dialing 911 because everything is right in their house. They have a crisis, they have an emergency, and they come when they dial that, they expect for the firefighters, police officers to remedy that problem. But they, these life safety departments fall into that situation where it's got to be a little bit different than a lot of the other departments, because you're dealing with that human life, and believe me, that cost. So we just need to keep that in mind. But I actually looked at that too when he was giving that presentation. And as I said, to reiterate, it is right that Commissioner Drosky asked those questions, but it is a collective effort of all of us that we may understand something from a different perspective, may be able to lend a little bit more information about why, the budget is like it is, and why it has to be looked at a little bit differently than other budgets that we have in the city or other departments.
I do not question Commissioner Drosky's right to ask any question at all that crosses his mind. He's questioning, and I'm giving my opinion. So we're both on different pages here. He has every right, and I would never refuse any commissioner the right to ask any question that he feels is contributing to this discussion.
Vice Mayor, I wasn't criticizing you. I was just saying that, I understood why he asked the question. I wasn't criticizing you.
I understand that, and I understand his right to ask the question. All right, do we have any other questions before we move on? Hearing none. City Manager, who's next?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. To close out the evening in terms of the presentations before we get the public input is law enforcement and Captain Burma.
Good evening, Commissioners, Vice Mayor, city staff, and residents of Deerfield Beach. You can go ahead to the first slide if that would be great. I'll try and go through this quickly. I know we're running behind. Just for the accomplishments and achievements for law enforcement over the last fiscal year, we've seen a 2-year steady decline in the reduction of crime. We've also seen, thankfully, that reduction in traffic-related fatalities. You'll recall that when I first became chief here, we were having a lot of issues, and with the help of city staff and also our own efforts, we've seemed to have made some impact on that. We opened our Operational and Tactical Intelligence Center, and we have a baseline of operations and staffing for that. Not the staffing that we would like, but we understand the constraints and the budgetary restrictions that we're under right now. We also have, after this last LETF approval by commission, we have completely installed scalable software and hardware into our OTIC, and we have begun a significant integration of camera feeds with other municipalities, government entities, our own city, as well as retail and commercial establishments throughout the city, and that will continue on. This last year, we've been very busy. You know that traffic is a priority for me. Traffic and parking are priorities for citizens. We get a lot of complaints. We have written nearly 36,000 traffic and parking citations over the last year and arrested over 2,000 persons for committing crimes. That number of 2,000 seems significant. You'll see in a few moments, it's actually a 2-year reduction in the number of arrests. Normally, that might cause a chief of police to be concerned, but as you'll see with the crime reductions, it's not that big of a deal. In fact, it's showing progress in some of our other efforts. If you go to the next slide. What we would like for fiscal year 21, the goals, expanding our OTIC capabilities, that is already in progress. We have a large effort along that route. as well as our strategic deployment of an LPR network throughout the city. That's a license plate reader network and intelligence gathering mechanism. Enhancing community involvement. We were stalled by a couple of issues this year, specifically with COVID. We did not get an opportunity to get the community advisory panel off the ground and walk the city. We only had one event other than our peaceful protest that we had this last weekend. Those we would like to continue with. We put a lot of value in our community partnerships and want to pursue those endeavors. Also, we want to expand our core, that's our community outreach, resource and education unit, to integrate that even more so with our community service organizations and partners. And one thing that we have seen is lacking, we've been strategizing on this, is we have lost a lot of our contact with youth and the teens in our city. And this is critical, you know, it's investing in our future, and that's particularly important to me. You'll see in one of the proposals on the financing side of floating SROs, school resource officers, we have a mentoring program that we want to start that is in each of our schools, and then some additional core specific events that target various groups of youth, not just certain ones, but ones that we can do a broad spectrum of assistance and trying to engage them into not only law enforcement, but into government in general. Next slide, please. This just gives you the idea of 18, 19, and then what our projections are for 20. The 2020 column is actual so far, and then we have a formula to calculate our projected. Although we had a reduction of calls for service during COVID, we still anticipate a slight increase over last year. By the end of 2020, we should have actually a slight increase, a few percentage points. The number of crashes is expected to be lower than last year. The same with our citations. We had a nearly 3-month hiatus on a lot of citations, with all of the people, most of the people being somewhat obedient, staying at home, trying to not travel as much. That has helped out a lot with traffic, especially in the beginning of the COVID crisis. And our arrests are also down and expected to be down for the second year in a row. However, if you look to the right, and you see the charges screen over there, you'll also notice that these are Part 1 crimes. These are our most significant and violent crimes. You'll also see that over the last 2 years, we have seen the reduction in that. We saw over the 2018-19 year, when I became chief in 19, we saw a 10% decrease in these types of crimes. And then we're looking at probably around a 15% decrease this year. Overall, somewhere around a 24-25% decrease over the last 2 years in these types of crimes. So to see a reduction in the arrests, it's reasonable with the reduction in crime that we're seeing. The bottom left, you see our parking. We have 7 part-time parking folks, which increase compliance, which increases revenue for the city. Although given what we've had to do with the parking situation during COVID, we still expect a slight shortfall of about $600,000. What is our projected revenue for parking this year? And about a $60,000 shortfall on our fines. Although that projection may be a little bit too conservative, given what I'm hearing about parking on the beach over the last couple of weeks with the number of people that are out there parking. We may not be quite as low as 60,000. Next slide, please. This is the operating budget itself. You'll see personnel services. All of our categories essentially went up. Our largest one was the transfers. Transfers have to do with the consolidated costs that are handled by downtown, which include everything from aviation to Marine Patrol, the detectives downtown, HR, all of those kinds of things. Some of those things are increases in liability payments. Some of those are also dealing with the increased personnel costs of regional assets. For us in the city here, the first line I say our personnel service costs are about 85% of our total costs. That is very much in line with other municipalities, not just BSO, but other municipalities in our area around the state as well. They typically range between 83 and 94%. That's typically the cost. And we have looked at also our number of officers, our number of deputies versus a crime rate density. That's the crime rate versus our square miles. And we're just below average on that. So we're actually doing quite a very good job keeping our crime rate under control. Most of the municipalities that have our deputy to crime rate density ratio have much higher crime rates. So we're very happy with what we have going on here. Part of that is due to the quality and the caliber of employees. Part of that also is due to, I think, our relationship with the city and our partners throughout the city, as well as our community outreach efforts. As you know, I've expanded that in the last 2 years that I've been here. Some of the highlighting of the costs of increase, looking at almost $250,000 for the P25 radio system. This is the second year of the 3-year installments for those payments. So after next year, that will disappear. Also, because of COVID and some preparedness that we have to ensure we have for the next year, that's about a $93,000 increase in our costs. And also for the communications for air cards, and that's basically related to our Intel and our cameras deployment, our LPR deployment. That's about an $81,000 cost for that as well. As Matt mentioned in his, we both were hit with delayed contractual agreements. Those contracts went back a couple of years, and so the pay increases went back a couple of years retroactively and kind of slammed us on our personnel costs. Those were some negotiated contracts that were expired. They were way past due a couple of years. In fact, I think they were 2 years past due by the time they were actually finalized. The next slide, please. So the future considerations, we do need to keep an eye on the increase in volume and the types of complexity of intelligence that's coming in. That does require us to train additional staff. We have, because of our regional assets, we have that financing available through our regional assets. The role of law enforcement vis-a-vis certain service calls, and this really has a lot to do with what we're seeing around the country. I was on quite a very good call earlier with the Council of Foreign Relations. It's an international group that came out of the Paris Accord in 1912, but a group of very smart people who are discussing this very nature internationally. And we had a good conversation, especially with the mayor of Dallas today. And these issues are going to be in the forefront. So the city needs to start thinking about these, how we're going to respond to these, what the city wants to do with regard to handling calls like mental health issues, people who are experiencing homelessness, medical calls, some of the lower level thefts, retail theft. Just as an example of retail theft, my deputies go out, they take a report, they're tied up on that, they're tied up with the arrest. The arrestee may have a medical condition, we get stuck with that. The reality is we don't prosecute that case. That case is prosecuted by the vendor, whoever experienced that retail theft, whether, whatever retail establishment that is. Same with civil matters, code enforcement, nuisance calls and disturbances. These are conversations we're going to have over the next 6 to 18 months to really examine the best and most appropriate way to utilize law enforcement. Infrastructure for law enforcement, our building is ancient. I think it's actually could probably be like a, what do they call that? Where our jail cells are like original. They're really kind of cool. But our headquarters building, it's still there, and we hope to keep it for whatever time we can, but it's fragile. And then policing in the age of pandemics, this is something new for everybody. Staffing shortages due to quarantines. We just need to make sure that we're able to maintain minimum staffings. The cost of PPE I showed you is almost $100,000 is what we're projecting for next year. Some of the things you don't think about, we in the past are typically house deputies in groups of 20 to 30 whenever we have hurricanes. That's not a possibility when you're experiencing a pandemic. If we were to get one infected individual and it went through 30, that's 30 out of 140 people that now suddenly are quarantined in this district. Can't have that. So there are mechanisms we have to have in place that are going to limit our exposure when we are policing during pandemics. Reduction in public engagement, that hurts us greatly. I credit a lot of our public engagement with our relationships and also our reduction in crime. And that is a damage to us that we have to eventually recover from. and then modifying some of the reporting mechanisms on certain call types. There are some jurisdictions that handle misdemeanor calls via the internet or over the phone, as opposed to having deputies actually respond out to the calls. Next slide. These are some of the contingencies that we looked at. If you look just in general, you'll see there are several capital items there. The city has done wonders with us, and we've worked with them on trying to secure grants to cover pretty much all of the capital items that you're seeing. We're hopeful that we will have all of that covered. So we're looking to cut pretty much 160,000 out of the capital request. Those items that you see there, although, you know, like see beach patrol vehicles, it's very important during the pandemic to be able to get onto the beach. We had only one vehicle that was falling apart on us. We were able to secure another vehicle, and I believe we have a grant that's going to be funded that will give us the second vehicle that we would be looking for here. So I think that we will be good by cutting these capital expenditures. On the personnel expenses.
Captain Brimley?
Yes.
If I may, what I'd like to do is we can just, if I can just start and then let you finish a little bit on the personnel stuff. So the first one that I do want to bring up, it's actually, I think, the simpler one. Every quarter, we get vacancy credits from the Broward Sheriff's Office on the law enforcement side. Because any positions that they do not fill, we get credited back for that. And so this year, it was my intent to reflect that accurately as possible within this year's budget. And so that's what we're attempting to do here, which is I asked the captain to look back and tell me what has been the average vacancy credits over the past 6 quarters. And based on that, we receive annually back from the consideration approximately $760,000. So really all this is doing is it's to more accurately reflect at the end of the day what the true consideration in terms of personnel costs are that we realize annually. It's not a reduction of any service levels that you're receiving right now. It's not lowering the amount of deputies on the road. There's absolutely no change to what that is. What this basically is a more transparent way to show what the true cost of personnel services are, to include the vacancies that we typically see on an annualized basis. I just want to make that very clear. Is that accurate, Captain Brimlow?
That's it. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And then I just want to preface the backstory on the SRO reorganization. Last year, probably about August, it had to be before that, it was probably about July. We had conversations with Principal Marlowe. He asked to meet with myself and I believe, I think you were there, Captain Brimlow, but the crux of the conversation and the purpose of the meeting was that school needed 2 SROs. And at the time we had solidified our budget. We had already gotten past the point of really being able to look at that. And, you know, we said that in this fiscal year, we would really look at what we can do in order to fulfill that request. And frankly, a request that I believe is needed. But I challenged Captain Brimlow to look at it and see what we could do to do it from a cost neutral perspective. And so I'm going to now hand it over to Captain Brimlow to discuss what he's come up with in terms of our ability to provide that and also enhance the service. Thank you.
So one of the results of MSD has been to transform our school resource officers into security guards. That's essentially what has happened. School resource officers have been essentially pulled out of classrooms. They are now functioning in a security position for the most part. And we have lost a lot of engagement with youth because of that. And all of the reasons that we originally we, meaning society, originally wanted SROs in elementary schools has all but been lost. There's very little engagement in the classroom. There's very little mentoring going on. There's it's the deputies are there. They're providing security and they're handling the calls for service that show up. So child abuse calls or neglect calls, missing child, that sort of thing. So the idea was to do two things. One is to provide adequate coverage at Deerfield Beach High School. Just as an example, you have over 2,500 students at Deerfield Beach High School with one SRO. And Deerfield Beach High School is not always the easiest school for one deputy to handle. And he's not able to provide even the service that maybe the school is expecting when he's handling that level of those number of students. Just to give you an idea, Boyd Anderson has, I think, about 1,750 students. So we're pushing about 750 students more than Boyd Anderson with the same number of SROs. And then, same thing with like Northeast High School is around 1,750. Anyhow, the point is to allow for the SROs to actively engage the youth, both at the high school, middle school, and elementary level. And the way to do that is to reorganize the program itself and place one of our SROs at the high school. So you would have two at the high school and one at the middle school, and to take of the positions that are in the elementary school and to have two SROs and our community outreach team cover the 5 elementary schools themselves as floaters. So they would be spending half a days at each of these schools for the purpose of engaging the youth. That would be their purpose. So maybe they're in there teaching self-esteem classes, or maybe they're in there engaging the youth in DARE programs or whatever else that we were able to do before, but now are prohibited from doing or limited. That would be the point of that. And they would also be, in a much broader sense, very much aware of what's going on in the community by being part of all of these schools. The schools would not lose security because we would still have, the school board would still have to provide to those schools a guardian. The guardians are on our police radio system. The guardians can come on the radio system and describe anything that's going on. We still would have our motor units doing traffic enforcement during the school zone times in the mornings and in the afternoons. We would still have our zone deputies responsive to the schools, but we would also have the specialized trained school resource officers, but have the ability to actually get in and interact with kids and to do what they were originally designed to do. In doing so, it's unnecessary to have that same number of SROs. There is a cost savings to the city of about $300,000, just over $300,000. Those 2 SRO positions, that net 2 SRO positions, those deputies would fall back into positions that are already vacant on patrol. So they would not be leaving the city. They would not be going anywhere else. They would be filling vacant spots that we have already in the city on patrol. So the idea is to do a lot of things that are better for us, taking the opportunity, but there also happens to be a cost savings to the city. So anyhow, on all of those contingency budget items, we're almost at $1.3 million, essentially a net savings to the city by doing all of those.
Captain Brimlow, the one thing that that if you could touch upon is the communications that we've had, not only with the principals, but the school board as well.
Yeah, we have, we had a meeting a while back with the principals, the elementary school principals. We discussed it with them. They get it, they understand it. They're also dealing with financial considerations, but they also realize that they don't have the SROs that they used to have. That they don't have that engagement, they don't have that mentoring going on. So they do understand that. It was explained to them how they would basically be having, 3 to 5 hours on any given school day, one of our SROs in their school, depending on what activities are planned, or, what is on the agenda for that day. But that would still be happening. So they do realize that. And we did explain to them about the security protocols for the guardians and how that would work and how they're able to communicate with us directly. And they're not losing zone deputies. They're not losing traffic enforcement or traffic control. They're actually gaining this additional engagement by the SROs. That part of it, they're extremely happy about. So that has been going on, and we've spoken with each of the school principals individually, both and also collectively. And even the current SROs have discussed it with the school principals, and it seems to be that everybody is on board. What was the other part, Dave, that you wanted me to talk about?
I think you had conversations with
With the school, yes, with the school board. School board is aware of what our intention is. We have a major downtown who is the school board liaison, if you will, for the Broward Sheriff's Office, Major Tony DeMarco, and he deals a lot with the school board. They know where we're going with this. They understand what our thoughts are, and they understand what their responsibilities are. Those guardians are to be provided to the schools at no cost to the city. That is a school board responsibility. What the city would be providing is that additional engagement from certified school resource officers. We would not take that away from them. We would still keep them with their training and up to date on that on an annual basis as well. So it's almost like a blending to get the best of both parts of that world. All right, I think that is the last slide as well. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do we have any questions from the commission?
I got a question.
Commissioner Hudak.
The first question, Chief, is slide number 3. Are those numbers calendar based or is that fiscal year based?
Hang on until she pulls it up. Those are calendar based.
Okay, I was just curious on that. Second question is, so if we take these 2 SRO officers and we reassign them, so now they're regular BSO officers, does that adversely affect our personal vacancies credit that we're getting?
No, it should not impact that at all. We, law enforcement around the country is experiencing difficulties with hiring, qualified folks, and it's a difficulty. I think that pretty much the standard is even of the people that qualify and get hired, I think we lose 50% of them within 5 years. So there's a huge attrition rate, and it's very difficult to even get qualified people up front. We'll see how that plays out in the next year, but I don't expect that to impact us to any large degree over the next fiscal year.
And of course, the last thing I want to bring up is that the school board gets a larger portion of the ad valorem taxes than the city does. And it is actually their responsibility to provide these SROs to the schools and not the city of Deerfield Beach. And this, of course, is not for the commission or for any city staff. This is for any of the public that may be listening. So please reach out to your school board, because this is something that the city is doing, and we have the cost of this when it should be the school board that has the cost. And I know that we've all expressed this frustration with the school board, and it just falls on deaf ears. I'm done.
Are there any other questions? I have a couple. Captain Brimlow, well, you go first. Commissioner Drotsky.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just to piggyback Commissioner Hudak, he is 100% right. It is a crying shame what the school board is doing to municipalities with respect to the SROs. It is their responsibility to fund, and they are not. And we have lobbied at the local level until we are blue in the face, and we have not achieved any results. We've lobbied at the state level with moderate, success. I think Tallahassee is aware of the issue, but until something happens from the state telling our school board members to do this, they do not seem very inclined to help us. It is just a travesty what they are doing to our students. And you're correct. You can talk to your school board reps, but I don't think it's going to make much difference. We need to talk to our state reps and make sure that they get involved and they force the school board to do what they are supposed to be doing. This is just an absolute disgrace what's happening. This, I guess, is more for the city manager, and maybe it's kind of a global kind of a picture, but I pulled the presentations from the prior years. So fiscal year 19, it's for public safety. So it's fire and police combined. So it was an increase of 3.6 million rounding. That was fiscal year 19. Fiscal year 20 was an increase of 4.0 million. This year, it's an increase of 1.4 million. How is this sustainable over time without raising taxes? At some point, we're going to price ourselves out, right?
It's a very, very valid point, Commissioner Drosky. You know, I alluded to the fact of, we don't have we have very limited ability to control the costs with the Broward Sheriff's Office. Again, giving credit to both Captain Brimlow and Chief Pelletieri and controlling the things that they can control. But at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to cost consciousness of what's going on downtown, and how in tune they are to the fiscal constraints of not only what we have in normal circumstances, but today. But I know I haven't directly answered your question. Cost will always go up regardless of whether it's law enforcement or any of our other services that we provide. They will continue to go up. They have consistently for decades, and that's just called inflation. But it's something that we need to be ahead of, and that I think speaks to a larger conversation with not just the district leadership that we have, but with some of the other folks that control the costs within the organization. I think that at the end of the day, an analysis, when appropriate, within the next couple of years on what it would potentially look like or what cost savings there could potentially be, if any, and maybe there's not, of having those services within the city, and that's not a knock at all on of course, Chief Pelletieri or Captain Brimlow or the Broward Sheriff's Office. Really, it's just prudent to look at these things from time to time and analyze them, as we have done with some of our other services. And so hopefully when we have an extra penny or two, we can do that. But obviously this coming year is not the time for that.
Commissioner, if I may. It was interesting, like even on that conversation today that I had, you look at the city of Dallas with more than 6 million people, and they're spending 62% of their budget on public safety. And I think that a lot of governmental entities are looking to see what that is about. Most of the jurisdictions, even around us, that have nothing to do with BSO, are spending between 55 and 65, 68% of their municipal budget on public safety. And I think that is probably also pushing some of the conversation and some of the topics that I had on my slide, on one of the slides earlier, that, what is the best use of the funding and how do you do that? But I think that that's a much higher level kind of conversation that the city, as far as, vision is concerned, is what they want to do. Because I would say with a great deal of confidence that the value that the city of Deerfield Beach gets for the funding of public safety is far better than a lot of our surrounding areas. I can point you in the direction of a couple of cities up in Palm Beach County, some here in Broward County, and even north of Palm Beach County, where they're spending easily 60, 62% on that. And not only just as a percentage is it greater, but if you look at their crime density, cost for crime density, it's much higher in those places, and their crime rates are even higher than ours. So I think that we're doing a very good job, an excellent job with the funding that's provided. But I think that the funding itself, in a more global sense of that, is something that is exactly what we were discussing today on that international call. I think that is something that municipalities around the world are experiencing.
Okay, well, I mean, I wasn't challenging any of our district
no, yeah.
chiefs, but by the same token, I would be remiss without asking the questions, that the taxpayers are going to be asking as well. And tangentially related to this, I'll throw into this conversation as well that, as you know, I'm your Broward League member, and I'm on the CARES task force, and the Broward County has allotted up to 30% of their allocation, $340 million. 30% of that would be $102 million is allocated potentially to the cities as reimbursements for eligible COVID costs. Now, what is eligible is up for debate and is what we're trying to seek guidance from the U.S. Treasury Department, because some of the items that we can put a thumb on right now is to recovering funds, which is budget related, is why I'm bringing this up. For example, our telecommuting expenses, our PPE expenses, those we can quantify quite easily, and it's not an overwhelming number. And it's not an overwhelming number for the 31 municipalities in Broward County. Where we're going to eat into that potential $102 million pool is for payroll expenses, and especially as it relates to fire and police during the COVID crisis. So there will be an upcoming discussion as to whether those costs are indeed eligible or not, that we can potentially recover from when we started in March through the end of the year, which may help our budget. But I mean, it remains to be seen. It's an ongoing dialogue. I know the city manager who actually will be involved. His association, the Broward County City Managers Association, is actually tasked with coming up with a formula as to how those $102 million are to be allocated between the cities, because the county commission was adamant that it should not be allocated on a per capita basis. So you can't go by the population of Deerfield Beach and our sister cities. They don't want to allocate it that way because some cities may have greater needs than others. So it's with the City Managers Association now to come up with a formula that the Broward League will sign off, or that will then be approached to the Broward County Commission as a whole as to how we can try and recoup some of these dollars, which may plug in some of the holes of the fire and police budgets we've just been talking about. So that's a long-winded way of saying there may be some relief, but don't hold your breath necessarily. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
You're welcome. Chief Brimlow, we are in a situation with this pandemic that the county has passed down rules, ordinances. Has our department made any arrests under the Broward County rules for this COVID-19?
We have referred many cases to the BPR for them to do licensing on, if that's what you're talking about, follow-up cases on licensing for local establishments that have violated the orders that have come down from the county and the state both. As far as arrests, we have 2 pending cases right now. There's a discussion as to whether we're going to prosecute those through the state of Florida or through the city. And the city attorney is working with the state attorney to figure out how we're going to prosecute those 2 cases that we do have criminal charges pending on.
Okay, that's a source close to my heart. I see too many people walking around endangering others without masks. And We have several very vulnerable areas in our city of seniors and African Americans and other minorities that are more vulnerable than other areas. And if I can save a life, I'm going to. So people look at me when I say, "Where's your mask?" like I'm out of my mind. And if they want to commit suicide, let them better step in front of a train than infect 50 other people.
I'm happy to see that the CDC and other organizations have actually come down to South Florida and have been sitting outside of restaurants and also out in public areas and have started to address the issue as well. Because that's seeing it from the federal level, I think will bring a little bit more clarity to the situation as well. I think people have lost sight of some of the safety precautions that they need to be taking with regard to this.
If I may,
One more question before we move on. Chief Brimlow, how many of your officers are on quarantine right now?
In the district, we have 2 right now.
Okay. Your people have to deal with other people.
Yep.
They have no choice in their job. Wish them both well for me.
Thank you. You know, we had 1 die earlier this year.
Yes,
from our,
I know.
and we have had others that had been quarantined and came out fine. You know, we deal with them as they come. Fortunately, the deputies have been really pretty good about their own PPE, so we haven't had a significant number of infections.
One of the reasons it's close to my heart is that I've had a son who came down with it, survived.
Yeah.
So it need not hit home before you could be aware that it's very dangerous out there.
Yes.
Thank you. City manager.
thank you. I just want to follow up on your question, just to make you aware that it looks like the county may issue an order tomorrow that deals with just that very issue, Vice Mayor. So it's expected, yet not released, that an emergency order will be released that will allow code enforcement and most likely law enforcement to close establishments who are violating the orders for a period of 24 hours. This is something that Miami-Dade has done. And so this is more of a stick approach where we've, you know, been very, we've been educating very well all these establishments, and we've done fairly well in the city of Deerfield Beach with our crowds. But all in all, when you look at the numbers that are coming up, I think this order is being handed down to put the establishments on notice in terms of the 50% occupancy, the social distancing requirements, the wearing of masks, so on and so forth. So just to let each commissioner know that.
Thank you. Are we ready to move on? Are there any other questions for our police chief?
Yes, I want to make a comment. I can see also that my colleague, Commissioner Hudak, is motioning to say something. What I wanted to say, you know, just looking at some of the comments that my colleague made, Commissioner Grodsky, you know, we're having to look at escalating budgets. I mean, that's, you know, chances are, as the city manager alluded, they're not going to go down. However, I don't think that we should ever have these discussions, as deep as they may get, without the public being involved, you know, as these budgets are created, so that when people start to scream and say, look at the police budget, look at how this is just elevating and going up and up and up, and the fire budget as well, then you have to involve them at some point to say, okay, you know, let's look at the police budget. If you were to take away this many officers, this is what you get. If you take away some more, this is what you get. So in essence, you allow them to buy the service that they want. So whenever something happens, they're not surprised. They said, okay, as taxpayers, we are involved, and you're making, you know, you're helping to make that decision. Because it can't always be about just a dollar when you're looking at life safety. You're going to have escalating costs. It's kind of built into it. However, you know, because you are a taxpayer and you are a part of a city, you should have some input in that. But you buy the service and you live with it that you choose.
Commissioner Hudak? Michael? Did we lose you? Well, why don't we move on in the meanwhile? City Commissioner? Mike Hudak? Okay. City Manager, what's next? The public?
Oh, he is there. I'm not sure what happened to his, he moved over in offices, as you can see.
No, I can't. I can see now,
Okay.
Commissioner Preston. I saw
We
you.
can
I
unmute.
don't see Mike.
If we can unmute Commissioner Drosky. Commissioner Hudak is in his office. He moved
Yeah,
in.
I lost internet service. So the question I had, and I'll go back and I'll try to get internet service back. But the question I had was, what percentage of our city budget is for public safety?
The percentage of the budget that is for public safety?
Just
That's
over
correct.
50%.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, sir?
Just over 50%.
Where other
believe
cities
it's
are
actually-
over 60 and 62%.
Let me get a concrete number from finance and get back to you, Commissioner, if
And
I may.
I'd also like to know the trend as well, if you would. Is it going up? Is it staying stable?
Okay. I'll give you a 3-year analysis if would that be sufficient?
That would be perfect, sir.
I'll give
Thank
you 19, 20, and then what we anticipate that will be for 21. Is that what you're looking for?
That would be perfect, sir.
Great.
That
I'm
would
gonna
be
go back to my office because I don't want to be too close to the commissioner.
City Manager, that
COVID
would be
purpose.
helpful to all of us.
Mr. City Manager, Mr. City Manager,
It
Yes,
can't log in, it says no internet service.
Mr. City Manager,
Yes, Commissioner.
can I get that information as well?
Of course, yes. I'm going to do the same thing that I did this evening.
Okay,
I'll get these questions. I'll report them to the City Commission at the beginning of tomorrow evening's meeting.
thank you.
Are we ready for the public? City Manager.
Yes, Vice Mayor, at your leisure, you may ask to see if there's any public who wish to speak.
Okay, is there any public that wish to comment?
We do have Glenn Clark Reed. Glenn,
I can't hear that.
Gwen Clark Reed. Gwen Clark Reed.
Good evening.
She's I'm trying to unmute her now.
Okay, thank you.
Miss Clark Reed, can you unmute yourself, please?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Gwen Clark Reed, 1430 Southwest 6th Way, Deerfield Beach. Unfortunately, I only was able to get into towards the end what Chief Bremlow was discussing about the budget, and the question that was just asked by Commissioner Drosky about, and Commissioner Hudak, about what percentage of the budget is allotted to public safety. In all the years that we have had public safety and BSO as a part of our public safety, it has been an escalating budget, and that has been because of the trends that have been taking place nationwide, as well as the trends that have been taking place with public safety in Broward County. I continually hear the issue about the school board. This is brought up at every one of our workshops, every one that we've had in reference to our resource officers. And as you said, this is something that has to be dealt with in Tallahassee. I know we tried to deal with it when I was there, and you will just continually have to push for it. And hopefully, with this new normal that we are in, we may not even need the resource officers using them the way we were using them before. So, you know, this is a moving target, as one might say, and we just have to continue to watch what's happening, continue to be very vocal with our elected officials, as residents, we with you and you with the school board members, as long with us and others. So I know that when you look at the previous years of the budget, Mr. Santucci, and you know this, it has always looked like, you know, we are continuing to escalate our public safety budget. And that's something that we just have to, you know, really look at, and creating under this new, under the new, as one might say, defunding, and I'm not for defunding the police. I'm for restructuring whatever has to be done to make our law enforcement and the community have a better relationship. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who's next?
There are no other speakers identified.
All right. If we're through for the evening, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See you tomorrow night, gentlemen
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
and ladies.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.